Hello there. Hello to everybody around the world. Thanks for joining me. A bit of Formula One chat coming up over the next couple of hours. The wonders of the internet, brilliant. And in theory, I say only in theory, all might come to a crashing halt. This should be in 4K. Wow, amazing. Windsor in 4K. Taken me a while. I think it's going to work. I know there's a drama with most cameras in terms of recording time with 4K, but when you're streaming in standby mode, as it were, in theory, it'll work. So there we go. 4K, here we come. I hope. Don't hold it against me if it doesn't work. So wow, yeah, what a weekend. Le Mans was impressive, wasn't it? Actually, I haven't really taken much interest in Le Mans since about, I don't know, 1975. No, I'm joking slightly, but I could go back to 1962 when they wouldn't allow Jim Clark to race because he deigned not to have a spare wheel on the Lotus 23. And they did actually put a spare wheel on the dash, just in front of the dash under the windscreen, created a special windscreen. And even then the AC West wouldn't let him run. So, Le Mans. No, but I thought it was actually quite good this year. I think, a friend of mine said, think about it. The 2020 LMP2 car is now about as quick as a hypercar 2023. So, yeah, they've had to scale back, but they've gone in a lot more rational direction, I think, Le Mans and AC West, and they've come up with a formula which seems to work quite well. Lots of factory support. Ferrari win at Le Mans. I think, Ferrari won at Le Mans. What can you say? Charles Leclerc was there. I saw Carlos Sainz put out a tweet the same day practicing his golf, which I thought was totally appropriate. Excellent. And I think Charles was seen to be making a very quick exit as the podium ceremony began or thereafter. Got to get out of here, practice my golf or whatever. No, but without in any way being cynical, I thought it was really good. Lots going on. Interesting racing at the front for a change. And we could say, Ferrari beat Toyota, but you could say, it's Toyota with their sort of range of relatively mundane road cars, almost taking it to Ferrari. Look at it the other way, of course, couldn't you? And Cadillac doing pretty well. So, there was all that. There was a Canadian winning the Canadian Open Golf at the weekend. Yeah, wow, congratulations to Nick Taylor. Let's hope, for the Canadians' sake, that continues this weekend. Lance Stroll, Canadian Grand Prix winner. Well, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. I mean, he's not bad in dreary conditions. And his Aston Martin is probably the third, maybe the fourth best car. I think he's got a better car than Fernando. Don't know, really. Probably he's got the best car there. So he's got the third best car in Formula One behind the two Red Bulls. So with all that, he's not half bad. He could luck into a win. Imagine if he won the Canadian Grand Prix. What the Canadians think. Canadian Open Golf. First Canadian win since 1956, I think. And then, for Lance to go and do that. The only reason I'm slightly more than ambivalent, I guess, about Lance Stroll is that I heard on the grapevine that, I think it was last year, they were thinking of a way at Aston of trying to sort of bring Lance to the Canadian fans in a perhaps more personable way than has happened in the past. And they organised at Aston for Lance basically to drive one of Gilles' Ferraris at Saint-Gervais, which I think is a circuit his father still owns. So, pretty mega thing, wouldn't it be? Drive one of Gilles' Ferraris, regardless of what it was. It would have to either have been a flat 12 or a turbo V6 or whatever. Would have been, nice. And he didn't do it. Why? Because, I'm not really a Gilles Villeneuve fan, apparently. Third hand. And I think, if he said that, you've really got to think, well, what is this guy all about? Anyway, I'm not here to in any way trash him. I'm just here to say I think he could win the Canadian Grand Prix if all things go well. Why not? He's in a very good car. He's just got the two Red Bulls to beat and maybe Fernando. But he beat Fernando at Spain, didn't he? Even though Fernando made it very clear that he was backing off and didn't want to put any pressure on Lance just to make sure he had a bit of a cushion behind him. Yeah. Speaking, I know I'm going to get on all the questions and comments. But there's something I just wanted to say, which I kick myself now for not saying it on the night of the Spanish Grand Prix in the video I did. Because to me, it was one of the great things about Max Verstappen. And we've talked a lot about how Max drives, that he brakes to a different point to most. He brakes to an earlier, if you like, false apex, as described by Jim Clark, which is this transition point that he knows is the moment of least possible downside, given the way he wants to extend the straight going into the corner and extend the next straight coming out of the corner, there is a moment when that rotation point is, you've got to do it, and this is the least possible downside. And it differs all the time, and it's just a question of eyeing it up and feel of surface of the road and everything else. And I say all that in the context of his choice of the medium tyre off the line in Barcelona, knowing pretty well that everyone else is going to be on softs, and how he approached that first corner. And I said at the time, he was crowded by Carlos Sainz, which was inevitable in a way because Carlos was on the soft tyre and the Ferraris always make a good start anyway. But what I failed to say, and which I'm going to say now, is that what was absolutely stunning in that first corner was how Max didn't lock up or have any problem at all under braking, even though he stuck to his game, which was to brake when he knew was the appropriate moment, given the feel that he was getting through the track, even at that point. The rotation point he had already eyed up going into one, obviously it's a chicane, and braking there, knowing it was going to be braking much earlier than Carlos Sainz because his rotation point was going to be sooner. And knowing that he's on the medium tyre anyway, and he had much less grip. And that is how he did it. He was, as he was accelerating up there through the gears, he was already feeling and eyeing up what he was going to be doing at the rotation point into one. And he just never went away from that. And that structure he has is why he's so good. Because that is a moment when most drivers, regardless of how good they are, if you're on the medium tyre, everybody's around you on the soft, you're on the pole, there's lots of people crowding you. It's very, very easy to lock an inside front or maybe just run a little bit wide or whatever you're going to do. And Max, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that all drivers would do that. I don't think Lewis would. I don't think Charles would. I don't know, probably, well, would Lando? Yeah, maybe Lando would. I don't know. I mean, certainly those three I don't think would. And Max didn't anyway. And that's the reason Carlos was able to get so near him, because Max actually braked earlier. He was on the medium tyre, but much more importantly, he was braking to a rotation point much sooner than Carlos Sainz's, who's got a relatively long corner technique. He brakes more or less in a straight line when he can and turns in quite wide. And that's why he's able to brake really late into that. He brakes into the beginning of the corner, whereas Max brakes to the slowest point of the corner. And that's what happened. And if you wanted an example of where Max Verstappen is so good and why he's so good, it was that first corner of the Spanish Grand Prix on medium tyres, in my view. Just brilliant. So I wanted to say that from the get-go, because I didn't say it in the vid. Too many things to think of, and but it was an amazing bit of driving, I thought. So I'm going to do a lot more on that, and in videos to come. I'm going to shorter form videos, recorded shorter form videos on my understanding of how Max drives and others like him drive, and what creating a short corner is all about, and why they're important, and why they're quicker if they're executed well. And then comparing team by team all the drivers within the team in the same car into that Rascasse section, which gives a very good feel for what they're like anyway in terms of what they want out of their corners. So I'll try and get on with that relatively soon. Seems to be so much going on at the moment. It's never seemed to get around to doing exactly what I want to do. Although I was just saying to Jack, my son, how we got so much done in a day. We get so much done in a day here in Spain. It's amazing. You never have to worry about traffic jams or things not happening. It all just song. We did about 6 things after school today, and I've just rushed from this amazing shopping centre relatively near us, which is open to the air, but it's like a shopping fashion mall type thing with a food court and then all the big name fashion shops and lots of big supermarkets. And our reason for going there was to get a 12 kilo bag of food for Dexter, which was quite a big, it's a heavy, big thing to lug around. Anyway, we went there and it was just, we got there at exactly the time I knew it would take to get there. We got back exactly the time. I got here 3 minutes before we went live, which is why I'm sort of slightly sweaty and red-faced, I suppose. But hopefully I'll chill out. I've got a fan on in the background. I hope it's not causing too much noise, and I hope everything's working as it should. No doubt I'll get some people saying, it's not working. So there's that. Le Mans, finishing off the Spanish Grand Prix. Oh, the other thing about Spain was that I might have lost some people with what was going on about in the qualifying, about how the longer corner drivers actually came into their own in qualifying because they were able to get the tyres energized more. And the more I look at that, the more I think about that, the more the pattern of whoever's got sort of slightly a long corner going into La Rascasse in the section of pictures I did, and then went well. Most of them all went well in qualifying in Spain. It's amazing. And so I think, I hate to say it, but I think I was absolutely right about that. And the only guy really of the short corner drivers who adapted really well was Max. And I said at one point in the video, I said on the qualifying thing, I said Lando Norris did really well P10. And somebody said, well, that's not that good, is it? Lando's up there P4, whatever it was, and he's scratching through in P10. Yeah, but look at the guys he beat. Excuse me, Sergio Perez, George Russell, some serious players, and Charles Leclerc, and in a McLaren that's not that good. And he's, as we now know, he's actually been following Max and trying to emulate Max's short corner thing. So for a young guy out there trying to shorten these corners and to be really neat and precise, I thought P10 was a really good result for him. That's why I said that. I just wanted to clear that point up. Look at the people he beat. Yeah. Anyway, let's get on to some. What else? There's something else I wanted to say. Yeah, I've just been sent this beautiful book, and I haven't done enough really to show you. It's called Formula One Technology, Steve Rendell. It's published by Evro. I can't really show it to you because my camera's sitting on at the moment, so I don't want to play around with that, but I'll give you more details in the next one. Really good book, Formula One Technology, and it's a good thing to have next to you when you're watching a video with Shub and me, or Scarbs, or watching me trying to explain short corners in the upcoming videos. Get Formula One. It's called Formula One Technology. Pretty simple title. Evro. Really good book. But I'll plug that again as we go forward. So I'm just looking around to see if there's anything else I've kind of forgotten, but I don't think so. I think we're kind of up to speed, and we can carry on now with some questions. Dennis Y. Dennis spelt with one N, as in Holm. Good. Although Denny was two, of course, but Dennis Holm, his real name was D-E-N-A-S. Hey, Peter, love your work. Looking forward to your insights. Thank you very much, Dennis. Joe McCarthy. Hi, Peter. Love these chats. Do you think Leclerc has it in him to put aside Ferrari's meddling ways and get fully focused on racing? He seems to know they're getting in his way, but can't stop them. Well, I mean, the thought occurred after Le Mans. And all this, we won Le Mans. The thought occurred was, well, why do we need Formula One? It's too difficult. Cancel Formula One. Let's just do Le Mans. Why not? If I was running the whole thing, maybe that's the decision you'd take. Save a bit of money, and you still got all the glory of winning Le Mans. No, as I've said, I think Charles is. I think he needs really good driver management. He needs somebody, A, to give him confidence, and B, to keep all the clutter out of his. There's a lot of. You want to listen to the signals, but not the noise. And that's what I think. There's too much noise at Ferrari in general, but I think Charles had so much of it that it's probably getting on top of him in an endlessly annoying way. And as I said at the time, if Max Verstappen can find the way to get the tyres to work around Barcelona, then Charles Leclerc should have. And it should have been, and if his brain is a little bit addled at the moment, it behoves somebody in the position of Frederic Vasseur, the team principal, to make sure that happens. And if he doesn't know that Max is doing that, other people around should be out spotting and noticing it and getting on with it. And they weren't. And I took careful note of what was done to Charles Leclerc's car after qualifying. And yes, they changed the setup of the rear suspension, but it wasn't because something was wrong. It was like a perfunctory change of, he's saying there's something weird at the rear, so we'll just change it. But it was just a setup thing. It wasn't, replacing a broken X. And it was the same with Perez, in Melbourne, and with the braking thing, and nothing there. And it's a worry because Charles is really good, and it could well be that only going to Mercedes or Red Bull or some slightly less cluttered team. What is the word you use? Meddling team with less meddling is the only solution for him. I don't know. At the moment, I'm kind of disappointed that Frederic hasn't got more on top of that. I thought he would, but it's still young. The season's still young, I suppose you could say. I've had no, it's disappeared. There was a lovely yellow question there, which I can't find now. It's just why I'm a bit inadequate with this whole chat thing, but I'll keep going anyway. RMDS KDVL. Hi Peter. Has George been let off lightly in past few races? Verstappen's side pods in Baku, starting position infringement on the grid in Miami, cutting the corner in Spain, whereas Yuki gets penalised. I think he has. You know, I noticed there you haven't mentioned nearly causing a massive accident on the straight in Q2 in Spain with his teammate Lewis Hamilton, which to me was absolutely the worst thing a racing driver can ever do. And you know, to pull out on the straight when somebody else is going much quicker than you and about to pass you and hit them, I mean, that's how we lost Gilles Villeneuve. I'm sorry. Okay, Jochen Mass was dawdling, I know, and didn't really know which way he was going to go. But it's the same thing, same principle. I mean, we were very, very lucky there wasn't a massive shunt there. Lance Stroll, exactly the same thing in the US Grand Prix last year, and exactly the same thing with his teammate Sebastian Vettel in the Brazilian Grand Prix. And it is, I'm absolutely staggered that George didn't get a much, much stiffer penalty for that. I mean, that what he did is so much worse than all the other stuff that we talk about that you get penalties for in Formula One, that it's, I just think somebody needs to be doing something about that. If you know, it's inexcusable, I think, to be pulling out behind another car into the path of a third car, which is going much quicker. That's what happens at Le Mans. It's why a lot of people don't do Le Mans. It shouldn't happen in Formula One, and it's absolutely horrendously dangerous. I'm sorry, I'm going on about it, but you make a very good point. And I was thinking, actually, driving here, I was thinking exactly the point you make. You know, why wasn't he penalised more? He got some sort of penalty. I don't know what it was, penalty points or a fine or something, but it wasn't very serious. And I think possibly it's because he's got quite a senior position with the GPDA, and he's very well thought of. And as you say, you know, Yuki got penalised, and fairly appropriately probably. I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but I think that's probably why George does get away with it, because he's got this senior position now, and they think, oh well, you know, he wouldn't do it intentionally. Well, it's not the point. Nobody does it intentionally. You know, if you do, you shouldn't be in a Formula One car in the first place. It was obviously a misunderstanding. But they seem to say, oh, well, because Mercedes, and it was between the two Mercedes drivers, because it was a miscommunication. It was, you know, it was unfortunate, but we'll try and make sure it doesn't happen again. Slap on the wrist. Completely wrong. You know, it's even worse that it was his teammate, because in reality, he should have been looking in the mirrors even more. So I'm sorry. You know, I'm a big George Russell fan, have been for many years, as people who know my channel. I've been interviewing since he was in GP3. And, but I think it's time that sort of error is really, really jumped upon. And it goes well beyond all the penalty descriptions in any stewards or FIA rulebook. That thing should be, 3-race ban or something unbelievably difficult, because it's inexcusable. And one day there's going to be a massive shunt if we allow that sort of thing to continue. Because we're talking top speed, and we're talking nowhere to go. Because there's nowhere to go on a straight. It's just guardrail, and then there's grandstands and people. And, I don't even want to think about it. So thank you, RMDS KDBL, for bringing that point up. Powled 111. This is the best racing channel, Peter. Well, thank you very much. I wish there was some racing on it, I suppose. You all know the reason we don't have any action is because, and I take my hat off, of course, to those that have paid the rights to use the action footage, because without them we wouldn't have Formula One in the first place. But because a lot of people out there, it's a lot, Sky and lots of others, a few others, some others, pay a massive amount of money for the rights, it's completely wrong, I think, for anybody else to start taking grabs off the TV screen or whatever it is and putting it on their channel, because it's inappropriate and it's disrespectful to the people who are paying for it. So I don't have any action, but I try to have a bit of action with my hands, I suppose, and and the latest camera technology. Yeah, right. How's it going, by the way? I hope it's still working. I'm looking a bit red-faced. It's only because I'm hot, really hot. Got all these lights. I say only. I'm trying to keep reasonably fit at the moment. Thank you very much anyway. Anyway, you're going to say you're at Silverstone 73 to see Ronnie drifting 73 through Woodcote. I was indeed. Yeah, I was. And it was just one of those great moments in racing time. I suppose when you're watching it at that moment, you're not thinking, what I've just seen there will be living in the history books for the next 50, 60, 100 years. You just think, you go up to Alan Henry or Roebuck or Morris Hamilton or Ian Young or even some of the other drivers, and you say, wow, did you see Ronnie through Woodcote? Unbelievable. You'd say it to Colin Chapman for sure. Unbelievable. I mean, he's got sort of 20 degrees of opposite lock on before he's even got to the corner, and then he's just drifting through. Do you see the smoke coming off the left rear, James? And James Hunt would say, oh yes, but it's not the quickest way, And yeah, but it was wonderful. That from that race, I'm talking about the 73 British Grand Prix now, Nicky in the BRM was just as impressive actually, because that thing was just an understeering, chassis flexing nightmare of a car with a really nice V12 engine, but it wasn't a great racing car at that point. With Firestone tyres were dodgy as well, 2-ply sometimes, and Nicky was unbelievable the way he was living with the understeer and getting and provoking a little bit of neutrality with his use of the throttle. That sound all right? I think that's what he was doing, and whereas Beltoise would always just live with it. So yeah, Ronnie Woodcote, Ronnie exit of Casino Square. Ronnie, brilliant, love Ronnie. M.A. Khan, hi. Studying the drivers, Max to me has the shortest corners, followed by Charles. Comparing Lewis and George, if anything, Russell has shorter corners. However, neither seem as short as Max or Charles. Very well observed, M.A. Khan. 100% out of, 100 out of 100. Or 101 out of 100 if Heinz Pruller had his way. As he once said, I do not have your keys, Peter. I am 101% positive, but I check anyway. And of course, he did have my keys. I often wondered about that 1%. It's a bit like the 20% when it predicts 80% chance of rain, and Patrick had said, well, Frank, our job is to be in the 20% where it's not raining. Anyway, yeah, I mean, well observed, because actually I did mention it in a live stream, I think last one before Spain probably, and you're going to see it when I start doing my videos of every team. You're going to see George taking a shorter corner at Rascasse than Lewis. Now, and you're absolutely correct about everybody else. And what I think is going on, and I have suggested this already, but bear with me. I think since the B version of the 14's come out, I think Lewis has twigged that with the additional anti-dive he's got and the lack of feel and various other bits that's going on, he needs to start taking a bit of a longer corner to get the feel he needs from the car, and maybe to get the tires working a little bit better as well at the front. And I think that's why he's doing quite well with this car, and that's why you're not seeing Lewis with these classic short corners, because he is. I mean, he's normally right there with Max and Charles in terms of how the rotation point he breaks to, and the way he gets to that point, and everything's beautiful to watch. But this year, if anybody's got a shorter corner, it is George of the two Merc drivers, and that's quite interesting, isn't it? George, it's a bit like the situation with Oscar and Lando. Oscar's thinking, yeah, I need to do what Max is doing and start shortening my corners. Why am I spending all this time out here when I could be making a shorter racetrack? And who knows, maybe Oscar's read Jim Clark at the wheel. I don't know. Maybe. Possible. Equally, I think George might have been watching Lewis for quite a long time and thinking, yeah, maybe that's what he does. Maybe I can save myself a little bit of energy here. And he's doing it quite well, but now's the time with that car, maybe not to be doing that. We'll see, we'll see how Lewis looks. There's a very good section of corners in Canada, section of road really, after turn one, as they come out of turn one and then have to brake for turn two, which is the hairpin. There's virtually no room to get the car absolutely straight for the hard braking into two. So you either compromise your exit out of two, or you go into, compromise your exit out of 1, or you go into 2 with the car a little bit unsettled and hope that because it's a slow corner it won't be too big a drama. But there is a straight after that, so it is a drama. And that's where you'll see Max. This is another thing that Max will be doing incredibly well. He'll be literally creating a sort of millisecond when he's got the car with very little load right in the middle of the change of direction, where he's just going to get the car stopped and he's going to brake efficiently at that point. And by the time you've blinked, the car will be just going nicely into 2. And you'll think, wow, it's cornering on rails. He's got so much grip. What he's done is just found the perfect moment on the change of direction to do it. And Lewis will be really good at that as well. I guess Charles will be. I'm hoping he will be for Charles' sake. But that's where I think you'll see a Carlos or a Perez or perhaps a George, maybe a Lando or 2, all, at some point they're going to brake with too much load that way or this way, and you're going to see one of these. But Max will be, it'll look to the eye, it'll look absolutely seamless. But that's a really good bit of road just there. I think it's the best bit of road in Canada. There's spectacular bits of road. There's also quite a good bit after the, first chicane, it's quite fast there. But it's the exit of that chicane. I mean, that chicane is quite a quick chicane, and it's very, it rewards drivers who are incredibly precise. So George will be really good through there. But it's not but after that's very quick and the road curves, but it's flat. So it's not really, and then you've got a couple of high-speed braking areas, which are good. And that's where maybe Lance will maybe be able to find a little bit over Fernando. Possible that from high-speed Lance will be focusing on his braking rather than, just jabbing the brakes and hoping for the best, which is kind of what Fernando does because he knows he's got the reflexes to handle it, which is why he does it. So, yeah. Thank you very much, M.A. Khan. You really hit it on the knuckle there. And you'll see it in the pictures. You'll definitely see it in the pictures. So here's one. I'm not going to lose this one now. Gasly's tennis ball is the owner of this. Thank you very much. Gasly's tennis ball. What a great thing. We're talking about all that, the stuff he does on the grid, which I wish he'd stop because he just doesn't need to do it. Oh, this is Osman. Hello, buddy. How are you? Greetings from Miami. What's your opinion on the current intra-team dynamic of Charles, Carlos, and Lewis George? Do you see shuffling across these 2 teams in the next 2 years? Charles must be out of patience. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Hope you're well. Hope you're enjoying Miami. Oh, revving up. That's big indictment tomorrow, isn't it? Whatever they call it. The arraignment or something. Arraignment. That's something out of Colombo. I mean, the big figure there is Charles Leclerc, because he's obviously, without any doubt at all, the guy will be unbelievably frustrated and very annoyed and very, whatever. And he'll be wanting to either Ferrari magically to get their act together and the car to be really quick, or he'll be thinking, yeah, okay. He may even be thinking, Alpine might be better than this lot in terms of my driving and doing what I know I can do. Look at them, top 10 every Q3 now. He might be thinking like that. He might be that desperate. I'm not saying Alpine's a massively bad thing to do. Don't take that out of context. All I'm saying is he might be that desperate to leave Ferrari. Now, it could well be that Ferrari are slowly gathering some traction and some pace, and the car, then the next upgrades look like they're going to be really efficient in the tunnel, and Charles will be working around that. But as I've just said, I think the problem with Charles is that he's not got massively good driver management around him. Jock Clear accepted. And I don't know how much involvement Jock's got now, because I'm shocked that he wasn't able to get the tyres to work in Barcelona. And I'm shocked that they allowed him to make that mistake twice in Miami, and he wasn't. He wasn't brilliant at Monaco. So I think he's the key there. And if he leaves Ferrari, and let's say he left Ferrari and went to Alpine, that would be quite interesting, wouldn't it? I think Mercedes, George will stay at Mercedes for sure. So the only question there is how long Lewis will want to do it. And a bit like Charles, if Lewis still thinks there's something around the corner that could potentially be really good, he's not going to suddenly pack up and go. He's going to think, okay, 23's gone, but 24 is the big year. As I said many times, if they do have a good car, that's the beginning of his troubles, because then he's got George Russell to deal with, and that's, not a great thing. That's why George will never be in a Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen, for example. So, yeah, I think Carlos Sainz is doing pretty well. I mean, considering the agonies of the ridiculous stewards' decision taken in the Australian Grand Prix, which I still think was absolute highway robbery in inverted commas. Considering that, I think, he went off a bit in Baku, but I think he's been pretty good ever since. Yeah, he had the shunt in Monaco, but he recovered from that pretty well. He's a bit lost in the race in Spain, wasn't it? It was a bit of a Carlos Sainz sort of race, but, he was there or thereabouts. He's on the front row, and let's see what happens in Canada. Canada's not that difficult. I suppose, that little section I'm talking about, 1 into 2, he might suffer there. He'll be okay through the chicanes. High-speed braking, I think he's probably pretty good now. Compared with, he's as good as Charles, probably, into the last chicane, into the hairpin, whatever. So, I think he'll be the most relaxed of... He and George will be the most relaxed of those 4. Lewis thinking, if I'm not at Merck, I don't really want to race, probably. I can't imagine he'd want to go to Ferrari, really, unless it's massive money. And Charles will be thinking, Alpine. I don't know. What else? I mean, if it's not Alpine, let's say it's not Red Bull or Mercedes, obviously, because there's no slot for him, and he's absolutely for sure wants to leave Ferrari just to breathe different air and see what he can do. And there's nothing to lose if you go with a lesser team, everything to gain. I would guess Alpine would be at the top of his list. I would guess. I can't see him wanting to go to AlphaTauri and be a sort of B team Red Bull compared to alongside Max. And I can't see him, if it was McLaren or Alpine, I don't know. He might go to McLaren maybe, like Oscar Piastri, but I think he might go to Alpine. But I think they've got contracts with both of those 2 guys for the next 2 years, so it's a bit moot anyway. And I suspect Alpine, more than any other team on the grid right now, are going to be honouring contracts. Thank you very much. So thank you very much indeed. Gasly's tennis ball. Brilliant. Here's another one from Brendan McCallion. Thank you, Brendan, for this. Do you think we'll see Alonso and Max have an on-track battle this season? What do you think it would look like, given Alonso's never raced Max wheel-to-wheel before? Hello from Ireland. Hey, Brendan. Hi there. Brendan McInerney, great Irish Formula 3 driver. Always thought it was a great name. Never got to meet him, never saw him race. Used to read about him in Motor News. Brendan McInerney. Great name for a race driver. Anyway, I bumped into Pastor Maldonado at Monaco, looking very fit and cool, actually. And I was thinking, there's Alonso in a Ferrari at Barcelona, home Grand Prix, and Pastor blew him away. It's interesting, isn't it, that he did that? And so on that basis, I'd have to say, when you say we'll have an on-track battle, you mean absolutely equal terms. In other words, Max has lost front wing end plate on the Red Bull, and he's on 52-lap old mediums, and Fernando's on 3-lap mediums, and his car's in perfect shape. Yeah, that would be, I'm being slightly facetious and cynical, but that would be pretty much eyeball to eyeball, wouldn't it? And yeah, I don't know. I just think Fernando's it's a bit like Nigel Mansell. Everybody thought because he had such a tough, strong handshake, that must be how he drives, and he must be a very tough, aggressive driver with his inputs. But he wasn't. He was very, very fingertippy and very sensitive and very supple. And I think it's a little bit like that with Fernando, but in a different way. We have this, we all have this correct image of Fernando being a fabulous racing driver on the day. In other words, he raises his game on a Sunday, and whatever the drive is that he's got in front of him, he kind of puts it in, doesn't he? And it happens around him, and he always looks on top of the car, and everything's homogeneous. But is he the greatest overtaker stroke eyeball-to-eyeball racer. There's a difference. He's a very good Sunday performer, Sunday racing driver, gets the car home regardless of its condition, very, very consistent, very, very able to leave 10%, 20% of his brain capacity to think about strategy and tire conditions, everything else. Brilliant like that. But in terms of actually racing, you know, you have to come back to the Maldonado Alonso thing in Barcelona, and I can't see eyeball to eyeball equal cars. I can't see him out racing Max Verstappen. Sorry, I just can't see it. I think Max is the ultimate racing driver as well as the ultimate short corner driver at the moment, and I think he would have Fernando. Anyway, we'll see. I think, you know, it's never going to be a fair test, I suppose, is the end of the answer, because the situation I just described, you know, the front wing end plate, the old mediums, the new medium, that would only last for a lap or two anyway, because then Max would either come in for his new tyres or a new front wing change or whatever. So, yeah, you know, but it's a good question. You know, my answer is I think Max would have him, is my answer. So thank you for that. Daniel Gould. Hi, Peter. Here is my Formula One prediction for the next 3 years. Max will win the next 2 championships this year and next. After that, it'll be a close fight between Mercedes again, and Max will win. Just. Okay. Yeah, pretty good. Speaking of predictions, I don't see anybody saying, Peter, unbelievable prediction you made before the Spanish Grand Prix that Lance Stroll would be much more competitive of late and may even out-qualify Fernando Alonso, which I predicted. I don't see many people saying, Windsor, how do you manage to pluck these things out of the sky? I don't see that. Come on. Anyway, no, but I did, you know, I just thought, I can't see Lawrence Stroll standing for that, and he'll want to see his son in the lights. But going back to that, yeah, I think you could well be right. You know, it sounds like a pretty good bet, doesn't it? I suppose the only thing that would come into that would be Adrian Newey, and how Adrian, you know, if Adrian suddenly accepts the €3 billion offer, I keep suggesting, I said 1 billion actually, that Ferrari make him, and leaves Red Bull. I'm not sure Red Bull would be a shoo-in for championship 2 years from now, but I think, but if he's there and it's the same team, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Daniel. There's another question come in. This is from Gasly's tennis ball again, different colour this time. Peter, it's the same one. Okay, I've answered that one. But it's just come through on a different colour. That's odd, Osman. Anyway, sorry about that. Thank you, Daniel. That's good. MM. I know Matthew Marsh? No, probably not Matt Marsh. Hi, Peter. Hamilton's contract, ? Do you think Shakira dating is good for contract negotiations as it brings huge Latin Spanish fans to Mercedes and Hamilton? Good for business? Leverage. Actually, it could well be Matthew Marsh, that question. Tax advice? That's the other thing. That's one thing that you'd have to question about the whole Shakira thing. I think, the other thing is what music does Lewis listen to in that headset of his? Very few people actually say, Lewis, take off that headset. I want to hear action. I don't want to tell you. I want to hear what you're listening to. Is it Shakira? Maybe. I remember I said once, what do you listen to? He said, everything, all kinds. Shakira, Peter, Paul and Mary, Frank Sinatra. I don't know. Yeah, but would Shakira bring in lots of Latin Spanish fans to Merck and Hamilton, thus enabling Lewis to get a lot more money out of them? Answer, yes. Providing Shakira had 5 personal appearances per week at the Mercedes factory, I think. Yeah, who wouldn't benefit from the whole Shakira thing? She is mega, isn't she? Speaking of Shakira and Colombia, I've just got to say, those kids that lived in the jungle, and the oldest of the 4, who had them living on farin, which is basically, I guess, porridge oats that was in the aircraft, and then basically berries and fruit. and survived. I mean, what a story that is. It just brings tears to your eyes to think about it, doesn't it? And also the people that were lost in that aircraft as well. The whole thing is just, imagine what's going on at the moment with the movie contracts being thrown around in those coffee shops in Sepulveda Boulevard, wherever they meet these days. Victor Rodriguez. Anyway, thank you very much, MM. Victor Rodriguez. Hi, Peter. Now that Dietrich has passed, how do you think it will affect the Horner decision making now that he has to report to a board instead of one guy? Do you think it could be trouble for Red Bull? Love the show. No, I don't actually. I think Christian's greatest thing, well, apart from being a massive Nigel Mansell fan, which is understandable and totally correct. It's Christian Horner, that is. I think Christian's greatest thing is that he's, apart from being very personable and articulate, he's kept Adrian Newey there, hasn't he? And that's why that team is what it is. And so long as Michael had Bridgestone and Ross, that was never going to go away, and everybody else is on a different tyre company. And then it all changed. And so long as, and he's gone out and he's kept Adrian for longer than Frank Williams or Ron Dennis were able to. And that's a great achievement. And so my gut feeling is that Christian in front of a board is very, very good. And I'm sure he does a really, really good sell job. If that's the right word. Sell job sounds a bit cheap, but we're all Formula One people here. And just as I think, Toto, when he has to go out and sell his Formula One involvement to new teams, to new sponsors, potential backers, investors, Mercedes board, whatever it is, I think he does a brilliant job as well. And I think Christian will be well up to that. And that's what he'll do very, very well, actually. Of course, if it's one guy and he loves everything you're doing, it does make life a lot easier. But I don't think it'll change much. From what I can see, Christian had already set that up in terms of the way he was going to work and interface with the board, and I think he's doing a very good job already on that. Carl Gevers. Hi Peter, can you address the South African Grand Prix fiasco please? Well, I can't really know. I think Dieter Renken is your man. He's F1 race fans, I think, something like that. Very good journalist, and I think he's now got a position with South African motorsport, or with the FIA, one of the two, kind of trying to make it all happen in South Africa, because he's a very, very able man with a very good brain. And as I say, I was eavesdropping a conversation. I was kind of waiting to talk to a couple of my mates, but they were talking to Dieter, and so I was sort of standing there, as you do sometimes, to wait for that to end before I could talk to my mates. But they were both McLaren people talking to Dieter about South Africa, so I was kind of listening, and I got the impression, as I said last time, I got the impression from Dieter that a few hurdles need to be overcome, but it's still not over. That's the impression I got. But please, all I can say is Dieter Renken is your man for that one, because he's not only very good on upcoming races and dates and money, but also he's South African, so he knows the South African situation like the back of his hand. Aaron Lee. Hope you're doing well, Peter. What has been your personal experience trying to drive with supple inputs and short corners on track days and the like? Have you done any days with Rob Wilson? I have done days with Rob, and Rob's I have done days with Rob's, and I think I kind of know what I'm doing, and Rob has never said give up in the same way that Carlos Reutemann told Ricky Von Opel to give up at Brabham in '74. Rob's never said that to me, but equally he's never said, wow, is this Kimi Räikkönen I'm sitting next to or Peter? He's never said that. But I've done my fair share of racing at a relatively low club level and done reasonably well, but putting me to one side, trying to drive, I do try and drive like that all the time, only because Jackie, a long time ago, always used to say to me, you can definitely improve your high performance driving on the road and just try to keep everything as smooth as possible. And obviously I do always try to brake to the slowest point of the corner where I can, and I always try to brake in a very gradual cadence, and I'm always kind of aware of when I'm going to put the steering in. I'm always thinking about it, I guess, and I've actually got a friction circle traction ellipse on my car, so I can actually see how I'm doing, and I do look at it quite a lot. So yeah, I don't think I'm just telling you why I always wanted to be a racing driver, like probably everybody watching this show at some point wanted to be a racing driver. I decided that I was never going to be a great racing driver when I started to drive cars quite quickly on fast circuits, and going into a corner, I knew the right thing to do was just to go in, just to loosen the rear a bit and then balance the car. And anything above about 65, 70 miles an hour, I found that feeling of the back end being slightly loose and just balancing it perfectly with steering and throttle, I found that quite difficult. And I could work at it and kind of make it happen, but it wasn't completely natural to me. And I think it was a balance thing. It is a balance thing. And so at that moment I thought, I'm just going to have fun at the level I know I can perform at and do as well as I can, but I'm not going to kid myself anymore. So that was me. It was that feeling. And funnily enough, it was that feeling when I was in that road accident with Frank Williams in the Ford Sierra rental car, Avis rental car, because he was driving, as probably many of you and I can drive, on tight bits, downhill, uphill, changing gear, heel and towing, doing all that stuff really well. And then we came out of this very tight mountainous section in France, and the road, you could just see the road ahead of us. It was it was a relatively small French B road, if that's the right word, and it was downhill, and there was a left kink, and then there was a long straight, and it was very inviting. It was quite open after all the trees and rocks of the mountain section we'd been in. And Frank just sort of went into fourth gear and went through the kink, and on either side there's just gravel, and it was a sort of road where if there was a car coming the other way, both cars had to have both wheels off the tarmac. It was that narrow, and as we went in, the back end of the Sierra did that. And I remember thinking, now we're going to see how good Frank is. And he did what I would have done. I think he just put on the opposite lock a bit too abruptly and a bit too much of it. Power steering, didn't have much feel, and the car got into a fishtail and it went off. And it's that high speed thing that and I've driven with a lot of great drivers on racetracks in road cars, and with them driving in the wet and sometimes in the dry, and it's those moments when you get to the old Stowe or the old club. I drove with Ronnie once, actually, if I think about it. I drove with Ronnie in a Ford Granada 73. It was 73 at the Goodyear tire test day at Silverstone, and they'd had these road cars there for the drivers to take journalists around in. I remember Ronnie, and we were going into Stowe. I remember Ronnie going into Stowe, and it was literally one hand on the wheel, absolutely flat, in this big, Ford Granada. And it was just like, boom, like that, just a bit of a flick, and the car just went like that. And he was just, and I thought we were going to lose it. We were sort of 90 degrees to the apex, and he just fingertips like this, and then the car was just perfect afterwards. I drove with Brian Redman once in a 911, exactly the same thing. I thought, I'm going to have a spin with Brian Redman. That's interesting. See what are we going to hit here? And it wasn't. It was just Brian completely sideways, feathering the throttle, and then he got a 911, quick car, GT, whatever, wing, the whole thing. So there we are. Yeah. Anyway, but thanks for that question. I mean, when I drove my claim to fame really is driving that Toyota F1 car, the V10, and I did okay. 15 laps, 2 spins in the semi-wet. And I got a few trophies up there. Macau, overall second place. Mitsubishi, Jackie Chan trophy. A few other things. Third place, Linden Hill, Formula Vs. Right, moving on. This is ridiculous. So there you are. That was it. Aaron Lee. Okay, another one from Aaron. Another question. Probably the same question. Excuse me if it is. I'm just going to check. Yeah, it is. The same question keeps floating up. I assume when I've answered it that it goes away, but obviously doesn't know that I've answered it. Aaron Lee, also not sure where his inputs and corners are, but I think Tsunoda deserves a lot of credit for his level in a critical year for his career. Spoke a few months ago about watching Fernando's defensive driving against Lewis in Hungary 2021 while following them, and then implementing what he learned in Turkey a few months later defending against Lewis. Yeah, I didn't know that, but that sounds, if he's watching others and learning, that's a good thing. I'm very surprised that a guy like Yuki Tsunoda doesn't do days with Rob Wilson. I'm absolutely shocked that he doesn't, because he could benefit massively. He's got quite long corners, but yeah, he does get into a rhythm now, and he's delivering, and he gets very, very hyper on the radio there, doesn't he? He's almost, ridiculous on the radio when things aren't going how he wants them to go with other cars or his engineer, whatever it is. He's always shouting and screaming, which is not a good thing. That doesn't square with Jackie Stewart's. You don't want to have any emotion at all when you're driving a racing car. Has he never read any of Jackie Stewart's books? I would hope he has. A and B, I'm surprised he hasn't done anything with Rob, because he could definitely benefit. He's definitely got the raw basic talent, and he's been honing it quite well, very well. But he could go another level for sure, because does he understand shorter corners? Defensive driving is one thing, but shorter corners is what he should be thinking about, really. And there's no sign at the moment that he's a short corner driver from what I can see. In fact, in the comparison I did, Nick de Vries has got shorter corners than Yuki Tsunoda. Joe Spiker, F8. Hey Peter, F8. F8, what is F8? I don't know. Asterisk, is it? After Baku qualifying, you said that Max could learn from Charles and Checo from easing of the tyres in turns 1 and 2, but being only a tenth or two down from the fastest lap with purple. In Monaco, I noticed that Max left margins on S1 and S2 just to be rewarded in S3. Do you think this was luck, or do you think Max has learnt from the previous street qualifyings? It's interesting. You're talking about how he wasn't brilliant in sectors 1 and 2 on the qualifying lap, and I made the point in Baku that he was trying to pace himself on that lap against Checo, and how hard he was having to use the tyres in sector 1. I think there were different things, as I said at the time. I think when Checo had that shunt at Sander Vogt, it was his teammate, and he was in a Red Bull RB19. And I think when that happens, of course you're living in Max Verstappen's world, and you're not in any way Checo Perez, and this is your thing. But there's no doubt that braking for Sander Vogt is a very, very fragile part of the Monaco qualifying lap, because there's quite a lot of shade there. It's slightly off camber. It's pretty quick, and it's quite easy to do what Checo did. And and having seen your teammate crash the car pretty comprehensively, I just think he would have been thinking there's no downside in being leaving a little bit of margin into Sander Vogt, because A, I've still got then the tyres for the rest of the lap, and B, I want the lap. I need the lap, and I can't afford to make any mistakes into Sander Vogt. And I think at the top of the hill, which is basically the start of sector 2, he was good there. I don't think he backed away from sector 2. It's just that Fernando was unbelievably good in sector 2. That's where the Aston was so good. It was such a drivable car. He could do a little bit more with it. And that, if every racetrack was just sector 2 at Monaco, I think that Fernando in the Aston Martin would be absolutely right there with Checo. But every racetrack is not like that, obviously. And I think he wasn't thinking, and he said there's no way to beat Fernando around here. But I think he drove a very good sector 2. It's just that it wasn't any better than Fernando Alonso, and he's already down on sector 1. And then came sector 3. So I don't think it was based on the tyre thing any more than I don't think they were having that problem for a start. So, and there was no sign of that problem existing, and it was more the margin that he was leaving, as distinct from Baku, when you definitely, the lap couldn't take all three sectors on the red tyre. So, yeah, it's a very good question, very good comparison. I'm only giving my opinion, and I may, obviously I may well be wrong. I have been wrong many times in the past. So, and then there's another one here. I believe he has analysed the previous street qualifyings and figured it out, which would be a scary thought, because then we have a world champ that is still eager to learn and improve by watching. Well, he's definitely eager to learn. Absolutely. I mean, there's no question that Max is, one of his great things is that he's learning all the time and being self-critical all the time. And you don't often see him making the same mistake twice. But every circuit is different, and every compound range relationship to the track surface is different. So just because the way to pace the lap at Baku was to save the tyres for sectors 2 and 3, it doesn't necessarily mean that was the quickest way to do the lap at Monaco. But it's a very good thought. And as I say, you may well be right there. And he does watch others, and he is learning all the time, and that's why he's as good as he is, just as Lewis is learning all the time. I mean, Lewis wouldn't have been adjusting his driving to the B version of the Merc if he wasn't capable of learning and thinking about what's going on around him and looking at others. So there we are. DPR 96. Hi, Peter. Alonso's driving style is the most unique. Is unique of all the drivers you've explained, and should require a very specific setup. Then how is he always one of the fastest in so many different cars? Well, because he's an unbelievably fast racing driver with incredible hand and foot work and coordination and balance. Once the back end is slightly gone, Fernando's your man. And so that's why he's always quick. He's never, ever going to be slow in anything. Whether he's as quick as Max Verstappen in the same car is another matter. What we're saying is Fernando will never, ever be slow in anything. Excuse me. And I've often said, he definitely likes to pitch the car slightly, just feel that, and then he's all over the spectrum of what he needs to manage, where he's going with the car, where is his rotation point. Slightly, he's not really thinking short corners in the way Max does, but he's thinking, yeah, now I can do it, and the corners are slightly longer as a result. And he's possibly working the tyres a little bit harder as a result. But he's got he's got more talent, I think, than any driver on the grid when it comes to just managing all the different dynamic weights that are flying all over the place. Is that the right word? Swirling, maybe. If you're thinking of, as I keep saying, the billiard table with the billion boards, and you're rocking it from side to side, trying to stop any of the balls hitting the edge, and the subtle movements you have to make in order to do that. That's what Fernando is doing mid-corner, every corner, and most of it is footwork, and it's brilliant to watch. Well, to watch, it actually looks he's always on rails. These things defy telemetry, but he's very, as you say, he's unique. So that's why he's always quick. But if you put him in a Red Bull and gave him a year of practice in the Red Bull, I'm not convinced if driving that way, I'm not convinced that he would be quicker than Max any more than he was quicker than Lewis when he was in a McLaren, because Lewis is a short corner, more supple with his braking inputs as well. Lewis, like Max, has this ability when he's braking to brake for a millisecond just to get the weight transfer right in order for the car to take the braking that he's going to give it. Whereas Fernando is straight on the brakes, knowing that he can live with whatever the car's going to do. But when he's living with that, it might be the odd jolt or the odd, jink. And that jolt or jink might then affect what he's going to be doing at the turn-in point. And that's the difference, that under high-speed braking, definitely Lewis had the advantage, even in 2007. And that's why I think, it'd be interesting to see how Stroll compares with Fernando in high-speed braking in Canada. There's a couple of places where that's really critical. Now, Fernando will be, obviously he'll be brilliant, but I'm not saying I don't think Stroll will be terrible, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it wasn't really an answer. It was just carrying on the conversation that you very kindly and smoothly introduced. M.A. Khan. Perez said post-Spain that he was trying to copy Max's driving style but struggled. Interestingly, Max said post-race he changed his style to generate more tyre temperature. Something you picked up. Really? I didn't hear that. I didn't know that, but to me it was pretty clear that Max was going to longer corners and just spending more time leaning on the fronts than he normally would. When Perez said he was trying to adopt Max's style, as I say, he was probably trying to adopt Max's short style, the run race where he didn't need to do it or want to do it or have to do it. Again, you know, I've given Ferrari a hard time for not having a spotter out there to tell Charles what Max is doing. And it's no bad thing to know what somebody else who drives like you is doing if he's going well. I'm amazed in a way that Red Bull went on top of that to get Perez up to speed. Why weren't they saying that to him after FP3? I don't know. It comes back to this business. The engineers are never out on the track actually watching, but they are watching TV. So why aren't they seeing it? I just don't know. I can't answer that question. You know, you watch the Indy 500 and all the spotters are there on the radio. Go, 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 no, no. You never have that in Formula One. Oh, no, we're on the pit wall. We're controlling the world. We're masters of the universe. And if my driver's slower, it can't be because he's turning in a different way to the other driver and he's creating longer corners. It doesn't show up on the telemetry, so it can't be possible. Everything that I'm talking about is never visible on the telemetry. We're talking absolute milliseconds, most of it. So forget your telemetry and get on and watch what's going on. But I'm staggered that Max actually chimed in with what I was saying. That's good to hear. Jacob S. Well, of course he chimed in because that's what he was doing. You know, why wouldn't he? Jacob S. Hi, Peter. What are some of the things you're excited to see this season? Newey has given Red Bull supremacy in 23, but are there other storylines outside the championship fight that interest you? Well, Carlos, I'm interested to know who's the better golfer, Carlos Sainz or Lando Norris. I think Lando is probably. I think Lando's really good. What else interests me? Let me think. Let's go through team by team. We'll start at the top. Max. Interesting. What interests me there with Max? Well, I'm interested. I'm always interested to watch Max. So I'm interested to watch Max in Mexico. How he behaves in Mexico in front of all those millions of fans that want Perez to win. I suppose that'll be quite fun. And how Red Bull handle the second half of the year will be interesting, I think. It's a storyline, isn't it? Because if, even from now on, really, they don't need to spend too much money on development of this car. So it'll be interesting to see how the others catch up, if indeed they do catch up, and surpass Red Bull in the second half of the year, because Red Bull are just spending no money on development. I suppose that's a storyline, and that's something that Merck and Ferrari will be, grabbling onto as best they can, scrabbling onto. So that's that one. Mercedes storyline, can Lewis continue to sustain his motivation to race, get out of bed in the morning and be a Formula One driver at the level he is? If Mercedes continue not to be winning races and George is annoyingly a 10th quicker here or there periodically, or more than periodically, I think that's the big thing at Mercedes. Ferrari, it's all over the place, isn't it? I mean, will Carlos Sainz continue to look better and better as he goes, into this season, with Charles becoming pretty demoralised, with the championship obviously gone already? Can Ferrari win a race, I guess, is a storyline. And if so, who will be in the winning car? Could be one of those Johnny Herbert, Rubens Barrichello situations, or Clay Regazzoni, Alan Jones situations. Alpine, I think Alpine's an interesting story. I quite like Alpine. I quite like that blue, and I quite like the two French drivers because they're very good, aren't they? Both of them, very different in character, very similar in style, I think, and driving style, that is. And there's always a certain flair to the way the French go about Grand Prix racing. I think Otmar's good. I'm interested to see if his son Finn wins a tournament this year, golf tournament. He could well do. He's very, very good. And then midfield, I don't know. I'm interested to see how Lando how the Lando Piastri thing goes and whether McLaren can be consistently good. I mean, I think they were good in Spain because the way Lando drives these long corners, he was doing exactly basically what Max was doing with the Red Bull. He was getting the tyres to work on the McLaren, and that's what we saw. And I wonder whether he's thinking, I was really quick in those conditions in Spain. That's bad news. If I was good, if I was driving correctly, I wouldn't have been quick in Spain. He's probably not thinking that. I mean, he said afterwards, I don't know why I'm so fast, didn't he, in his typical Lando way. I don't know. Let's think about they're not the answers you want, are they, really? Jacob S. I think you're probably thinking, what are you thinking? I don't know. New teams on the grid. Do you think Cadillac's top three? Are they third, I think, at Le Mans? Will that finish help their cause in terms of coming into Formula One with Michael Andretti? That's a good one. Good storyline, perhaps. Will Ferrari focus on Le Mans from now on and get out of Formula One? Probably not. For sure not. But, why not? Floated as an idea. So there you are. I don't know. Storylines. I just wait and let every race happen and try to enjoy them, really, without getting too, I don't need a lot for me to enjoy a race, really, providing I see guys doing really good things and Max driving as well as he is in different situations and Lewis overcoming, quite a lot of reasons not to be quick and still is quick, and Charles not understanding what's going on. Quite fun, really, isn't it? F1 Driver Market is the name of this one. I watched an interview that you did, Peter, with Lewis in 2017. He seems so open and willing to talk, far beyond the usual interviews he gives. Can you give some insight into what it's like interviewing Lewis? Well, yeah. I mean, he's a really easy guy to talk to. He loves chatting about racing. Every time I chat to Lewis, it's always, we go off on different tangents and have a laugh. And he's a very, very easy guy to talk to, I find. I suppose I never go into an interview with Lewis thinking it's an interview. I just go and think, oh, wow, chat to Lewis and ask him a few questions that I need answers to for myself. And it always goes in that direction. And sometimes he'll say, well, why are you saying that? And I'll say, well, because of this and that. Oh, well, yeah, maybe you're right. It's good. There's a few questions. I haven't spoken to him for a long time, actually, and I need to have another chat to him at some point if I can create the situation. It's not easy these days because recently he does these sort of set piece things where, I don't know, I'm going to say it, most of the questions are ludicrous and he gets annoyed and, gives short monosyllabic answers. And then usually I sort of hang out the back or the side and grab him as he's leaving and say, oh, Lewis, what about this? And he starts to chat. And as he's about to say something really interesting, some Mercedes media person comes up and says, Lewis, you've got to go here, you've got to go there. And they grab him and he disappears. And that's about the end of it. So that happened about 3 times. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to do this too much longer. It's getting a bit ridiculous. Too old for this. But when I do chat to him, it's always fun, as it is with most of the drivers, actually. So, yeah. I always think, if anybody wonders what I think about interviewing and how to interview people, to me, it's always important to listen to what the person you're talking to is saying. And it's a bit of a generalization, but I'd say 80% of the time, whether it's politics, sport, whatever, show business, usually the interviewer doesn't listen because they're so paranoid about the question they've just asked and what the next question's going to be that they never listen to what the interviewee is saying. And so the interview never goes anywhere. And quite often, even on especially the BBC, Sky, all these people, they ask a question and there's a very interesting thing said in the question, in the answer, and they never pick up on it, and they ask basically the same question again, even though the guys just said that. And it happens so much now, and no wonder all these people get bored with doing interviews because the questions are nonsensical. Usually, I find the whole point of talking is to have a conversation where you can say, "Oh, what do you mean by that? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's good." I mean, they said, what was it? Somebody I was listening to a political thing the other day, and they were saying, "Oh, this is only the second time. It's the second time this a president has been charged." The logical question was, well, who was the first, and why did it happen? But nobody asked it. I suppose they all knew. Anyway, listen to what they're saying would be my advice. Just have a normal conversation and everything's fine. M.A. Khan, do elite drivers with slightly longer corners such as Hakkinen, Senna and possibly Lewis have an advantage in generating tyre temp over those with short corners such as Nigel, Max or Schumacher? Well, only in situations where tyre temperature is an issue. It's not, we've only had one race this year where that became a really big thing, and it was qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix because the ambience were relatively cool and it was the second hardest on the Pirelli compound range. But generally speaking, it's not the thing that dominates the pit lane. Even though some people in Spain didn't seem to realize it was dominating the pit lane, but it was the thing. But when you get into those weird situations, they only come around 2 or 3 times a year. Generally, as Max showed, creating a longer corner and leaning on the left front or the right front a bit more, and just generally moving the car around a bit more and getting the power on perhaps a little bit earlier than you normally would. Those are the things you can do to energize the car. And everybody presumably knows that because of Jody Schechter's pace in practice for the 1975 Race of Champions in the Tyrrell, when it was a similar thing. Nobody could get tyre temperature. Schechter was 4 seconds quicker than anybody, purely because he was sideways everywhere in the Tyrrell. Nothing's changed. And I wonder how many people in the pit lane were thinking, Race of Champions, 75, Schechter, the minute qualifying began in Barcelona this year. Probably not many. And it's not a question of sideways these days because you can't do it on the Pirellis, but it is a question of using the tyres more. And that's what Max did. So suddenly Max jumped over the fence to the Perez side of the fence. And Perez, thinking, I better drive like Max, went the wrong way, probably. Hakkinen, yeah, absolutely. I think he was in his longish corner, but very, very top level, as you say, and Aston as well. And they both would have been incredibly good in situations where tyre temperature was difficult to generate. Definitely, absolutely. I've got the feeling that Max and Michael, and certainly Nigel did it a couple of times when tyre temperature was an issue. Nigel was quite capable of extending his corners and just generally using the tyres more. It was so obvious to Nigel. And Carlos was really good at that. And I guess Michael was. Yes, Max isn't the first guy ever to do that. First short corner mega driver to do that. It was just very obvious in Barcelona. Dan Steen's message has been retracted. Sorry about that, Dan. That's nothing I said. Alessandra Durango, great name. Hi, Peter. How would you see Charles Leclerc in WEC? I think he'd be a bit lost there. I don't think you can see too much of the drivers there. I mean, I was really pleased to see Antonio Fuoco, I think, isn't it? The guy that won it, Italian Ferrari Academy driver, Ferrari driver now, obviously, Prema driver. And I was at Prema once, and he was there in the gym and doing stuff. And I just thought, wow, this is dead cool Italian. He's probably never going to make it. He's probably pretty good. And I remember thinking, what it must be like for a guy like Fuoco, because he's not slow, but he hasn't got a clear path to Formula One. And here he is winning Le Mans in a Ferrari. And I'm thinking, wow, it's good. I'm glad it exists. But I can't imagine Charles would do anything different to a Fuoco or a James Collado. I can't see it because there's so much is involved in managing the engine and the car and the distance, and it's a bit of a waste to have guys like Leclerc in there, I think, to be honest. It was a waste, dare I say it, to have Michele Alboreto there. I wish he'd never done it. Karma in Babylon. Hi, Peter. I'm tickled that you like the name. Cheers. I've been a long-time fan of yours. Michael and Lewis in Canada. What's their secret? And a quick one on Elio De Angelis, please. Well, Michael and Lewis in Canada, it's all those things I just said about exit of 1 into 2, high-speed braking, very important. I mean, high-speed braking into the last chicane is critical because if you've got stability at the end of the braking area, approaching your rotation point, the chicane's done. That last bit coming out, hitting the wall or not hitting the wall, that's all for reactive drivers who have got it slightly wrong on the entry, have got a bobble on the car under braking, maybe hit the curb too much on the apex, or maybe given it not enough steering and then too much steering, going into the right-hander, all those sorts of drivers. But it's not for Max Verstappen type drivers, because all the work for that last chicane is all in the first part of the corner. And once they're there, you're just driving to the exit of the corner. But it's all about high-speed braking, and it's all about this millisecond of warning the car what's going to happen next, which is the hard braking, and making sure the load is on the front and the car is stopping efficiently. And that's why you might see Max, apart from the fact that he would be braking to an earlier rotation point than many drivers, because he's shortening it, extending the exit as well. Apart from that, it's also that Max will be probably the thing whoever is doing all that measurement of who's braking, where, going into the last corner, wherever it is, they come up with these graphics. Probably when Max is doing his initial thing, it's not registering. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So we're not getting a true reading of Max anyway. He's probably braking even earlier than they thought. But he's braking, he's what they need to be doing. If they're going to do Max compared with Perez braking into the hairpin, they need to say, okay, this is the measurement point for the start. But what are they braking to? Because Max is braking to a different point to Perez. I bet they're not taking that into account when they're doing this thing. So it's, high-speed braking, transition out of 1 into 2. That's it, really, I think. And if they've been in good cars, guys who drive well are going to do well in Canada. And, those records reflect as much the dominance of the cars they were driving, in Michael's case, the Ferrari, Lewis, the McLaren, and Mercedes, as they do, their skill around that circuit. So, Elio De Angelis, please. Yeah. Just, I saw him in Formula 2 in that Chevron. He was really quick. I saw him at Thruxton. I think it was Thruxton. I saw him. Donington, maybe. Saw him in the shadow days, and he was always. Let me think. If you think about Eddie Cheever, René Arnoux, I always had Elio in my mind, slightly ahead of those two. Classy driver, very classy. I wouldn't have said he was short corner. He was quite. He was. I would say Rubens Barrichello, sort of look to the way he drove. Don't forget he was a right foot braker, gear changer, very good gear changing coordination. And then, smoked, played the piano beautifully, dead cool. He would wear his overalls tied around his waist, but then he would wear a polo shirt, which is always a good look, really, isn't it? And he was sponsored by a very cool Italian tennis clothing company called Australian, even though it was a kangaroo logo. I think it was an Italian company for sure, and Elio was their man, and so their kit was really nice as well. He wasn't, he was just dead cool, and he wouldn't have had lots of logos anywhere. From memory, his track pack was like Carlos, was a big Louis Vuitton thing that he put over his shoulder. Smoked quite a lot. The hair. Don't ever remember him shouting or screaming. Very relaxed, calm. Good guy. I remember I was with Peter Collins, a good friend of mine. We were in South Africa. And it was when he was driving for Lotus, early Lotus days. And Elio was sitting there. And it was the early days of the Sony Walkman thing. And Peter said, "What are you listening to there, Elio?" And it was Al Jarreau. And he said, "Oh, it's Al Jarreau. He's very, very cool, very cool." And he was when Al Jarreau was cool, Still is cool, isn't it, of course? But, that was Elio. And it's, he was, I don't know. What is it about Italians? You see it. You drive into any Italian city, village, town square, and from the age of about 12, 13, all the kids look unbelievable the way they dress, don't they? I mean, they're all wearing, all they're doing is wearing faded jeans and T-shirts, but everything is perfect. And Elio was like that. He could get out of bed, his hair would be everywhere, and he would just be Mr. Dead Cool. He was just, I can't really say much more than that. I think he was at least as good as Rubens. And I think, that win he had over Keke showed what a racer he was in Austria '82. And, he was there when Colin died. He was at Lotus when Colin died, and he went through that period and took them to the next level, I think. And it was just so sad, so sad in that Brabham that, he lost his life. And that Brabham when, it was just, everything was on the edge on that Brabham in terms of the design, and something broke on the rear wing, fast corner at Ricard, and we know the rest. It was just a terrible, terrible day. And I think I mentioned I went to his funeral in Rome, and there were doves in the cathedral, flying up in the cathedral. I remember that. And I remember afterwards going to the Foro Italia, when they were playing the Italian Open tennis. It was the first week of it, and sat there in a more or less empty grandstand just thinking of Elio. I played tennis with Elio quite a lot. Good player, much better than me. Anyway, Elio. Hey, Peter, I can't see who this is from, actually. It looks like it's a foreign script. Hey, Peter, love the streams and the insight you bring. Do you think Yuki is ready for a Red Bull seat, or is he just a midfield backmarker driver? Well, I mean, he'd look good in a Red Bull. Yeah, he wouldn't look bad alongside Max. Would he do a better job than Perez? I'm not sure he would, actually. I think he's quite capable. I mean, he and about 10 other drivers are quite capable of winning a Grand Prix in a Red Bull RB19 if Max has a problem. Whether he'd be capable of beating Max the way Checo has beaten Max on occasions, once or twice, I don't think he could. So on that basis, I don't think he'd be a better driver than Checo to have in the other car. But there's less need for Red Bull to run him because they're not with Honda anyway, right? So if anything, he should be thinking of Aston Martin alongside Fernando Alonso or Stroll, Yuki. No, I think he's all right. I don't think he's as good as Kobayashi. Actually, I think Kobayashi he's the best Japanese driver I've seen for a long time, and I don't think Yuki's quite as. I mean, Kobayashi actually had quite short corners. He was pretty good naturally, and I don't think Yuki's quite there. Is my take, and he's very good. I don't think he's Takuma Sato, and I don't think he's Kobayashi. Diamond Dog. Ferrari need to replace Leclerc. He's not the driver that can push the team forward. Well, the driver shouldn't have to be pushing the team forward. It should be the team manager and the team principal pushing the team forward. He's definitely one of the fastest drivers on the grid today, one of the top 3 drivers, I would say. And it's not up to Charles to be pushing the team forward. It's not any more than it was up to, Lewis to make sure that Adrian Newey came to McLaren so he would stay at McLaren. It's not, you occasionally have a Niki Lauda or a Jackie Stewart or a Michael Schumacher who's in a position to set up their own team and get the right people, and it all works perfectly. But the situation Leclerc is in, I don't know what else you could be expecting him to do in terms of making the car a quicker car, other than persuading Fred to hire Adrian Newey, which I don't think is going to happen. So, of course, it's not going to happen. So, what else can Charles do? What Charles needs is more, I think, he needs more guidance on the driver management side as a driver. So it's not a question of the team. It's just he needs to stop making mistakes. He needs to be the driver that we know he is. And he's not getting the best from himself. He didn't get the best from himself in qualifying in Barcelona. No question about that. Why wasn't he getting tire temperature? Because he wasn't driving the way Max was driving. But I don't think anybody at Ferrari, even today, probably thinks that. And that's the problem. And that's not Charles' fault. I think that's probably right. That's Freddie Vasseur's fault. He should be on top of that. That's what you need to be doing at the front of the team. So that question actually would be better directed to Frederic Vasseur. What can Frederic do to push the team forward and maximise the quality of the drivers that he's lucky enough to have? That's the question, in my view. Not sure I know the answer. Apart from, in terms of engineering, It's a difficult one. Young man. Good name. Evening, Peter. What changed to allow Kimi to win the title in 2007 when he couldn't in past years? Did he elevate his driving, or was it just a better car and McLaren instability? I think, I mean, in all the years when Kimi wasn't winning the championship at McLaren, basically it was very difficult to beat Michael when Michael basically had Bridgestone tyres exclusively on the Ferrari, and you were fighting not only Ross Brawn, Michael Schumacher and all of Ferrari, but also the might of Bridgestone, whereas Michelin had 5 good teams, and it was much more difficult for Michelin to build tyres specifically for one team, whereas Bridgestone were doing that for Ferrari. That's a huge advantage and should never be understated. Tyres, driver, engine, those 3 things are absolutely critical, and in this case, it was tyres. We never see that situation today, so it's hard for many viewers probably to imagine what that's like. But if you've got Bridgestone building tyres basically to suit your car and what your driver thinks about the upcoming circuits, and that driver's Michael Schumacher, and your engineer's Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne, and it's all the might of Ferrari and all that, and Bridgestone are getting all the telemetry and all the details, all the data, that's a pretty big thing. So, you know, for McLaren to fight that and beat that was almost impossible. And then when, you know, Bridgestone pulled out and Ferrari went off the boil, it was kind of when Kimi made the move anyway, and he went to the Ferrari team that was continuing that momentum, even though, you know, it was a different tyre situation, and he won on the back of that. So actually, you could say he did pretty well. You know, he did pretty well in a situation where Michael had a huge advantage, really, and he did very well when he went to Ferrari. So, and he didn't do badly when he was at that. When is it? Can I call it Benetton? No, it was Renault, or was it Lotus? I don't know what it was. Benetton Formula. There you go. So yeah, I mean, if you think about the way Kimi was all over Montoya, for example, pretty impressive, wasn't it? And because Montoya was not slow, he wasn't quite as quick as Ralph, but he was pretty quick, pretty good racing driver. And Kimi was, you know, consummately better, I think, all round. And but it was difficult in that whole Michael era. So that was it. I think, you know, big Kimi fan. I think I wish he'd stopped actually then and not continued really, because he'd done it by then. He didn't need to race anymore. He should have stayed in rallying. So WC Robinson. Hey Peter, do you think DRS being removed would make Formula One more exciting? It would have made Verstappen's job in Saudi and Miami much harder and likely more entertaining for the viewer. Thanks as always. Well, I think you've mentioned 2 circuits there where you could get away with no DRS. Miami, I made the point after the race, it was a rhetorical question, but would Max have won that race with no DRS? You know, it would have been close. He probably wouldn't have beaten Perez, probably, but I think he would have been somewhere near it, actually, because he would have had the toe. He was so quick and in different tyre strategies, that, you know, he had the grip level when others didn't, when their tyres were going off, when all the mediums were starting to go off, his hards were just coming into their own, and you know, and at that point he would have just been blitzing it the same way as he did with DRS anyway. And I think the same in Jeddah, you know, there's the long straights there, and do you really need them? And in fact, those DRS things, all they do is actually bunch everybody together and make life a lot more difficult. So I think there's an argument for not having DRS at selected circuits just to see how it goes. The problem is that F1 are absolutely focused, always have been since the new regs hit the ground in 2022, on having as much overtaking as possible, the big O word. And if you have, you know, with the 2022 cars, the hope was that because they were going to be easier to follow, that they could get rid of DRS. And there are certain members of the Liberty F1 planning committee, if that's the right word, who would like to see DRS go. I know that. But over the winter, and actually with the technical directives that came in after Spa or for Spa last year, and then over the winter with cementing those directives, which have got rid of most of the porpoising, although we saw quite a lot of it in Barcelona. Those directives, those reg changes, have actually made the aero more aggressive again, and it's a little bit more, it's more difficult now to follow other cars through medium and high speed corners than it was in 2022. And you know what's coming next. So as a result, they're saying, oh, well, we better not get rid of DRS because we might end up with some processional races, heaven forbid. So I think you made a good point, though. I think, circuits like Monza, Jeddah, Miami, I don't know where else. There's probably some others I can't think of. Vegas looks like, those places, maybe you don't have DRS. But there'd be somebody quite brave at Liberty who'd be pushing for that, because I think in general, all they want to see is lots and lots of overtaking. And they think that the more DRS zones you have, the more overtaking you're going to have. Erwin Mulder says, hello there. And I say, hello, Erwin. Michael Lawless says, what is the next race you'll go to? North America? That's a good question, actually. I might go to the French Grand Prix. Might go to Hungary. I don't think I'll go to Silverstone, a bit too much. Not massively into the whole new wing thing, and from where I am here, it's a bit of a hassle going to Silverstone, to be honest. So yeah, I might drive to the French Grand Prix. Hungary is one I might look at. Spa, I think. Monza, Singapore for sure, and then I don't know. I would hope. I'd probably be in Vegas, I think. I'm not sure. I haven't been to Aston or Mexico recently, but might. I don't know, really. It's, you know what? My son's starting to play in some golf tournaments now, even at his age. And that calendar is relatively full. And I don't want to miss those. I'm the caddy, apart from anything else. So why would I want to miss them? Very important. The course he's playing at this weekend, 16 of the 18 holes have got water, a lot of water. Thank you, Manuel Pinheiro, designer. So there we go. Joe, hi Peter. How do you think Max and Fernando would do together at Le Mans? Thanks. I think they'd probably agree to blow up the car in hour one and go and have fun doing something else, wouldn't they? That's probably what they'd do. I don't know. Is it fun doing Le Mans? I think for people who are into Le Mans, it's massive fun. I don't know. I think I can think of a few things I'd rather be doing. It's only me. I've always been a sort of Formula One elitist, I suppose. But that doesn't mean to say I don't love Formula 3, Formula 2, IndyCar, kind of. I used to love IndyCar, let's put it that way. Used to love IndyCar. And that's it. That's enough, really. I just, the whole Le Mans thing I find, I don't know, too long. What can I say? Shouldn't be saying all that, should I? Should love it all. Max and Fernando, Le Mans. Well, Fernando did Le Mans, didn't he? So the question is Max. I think Max would get pretty bored with the whole thing, wouldn't he? He'd get very annoyed with drivers getting in the way, for sure. Syrian Gaming, Senna or Prost? It's a question mark, rhetorical question. Senna or Prost? Who was the better at radio-controlled aircraft? I think Senna was. Who was better at radio-controlled cars? I think Senna was. Who was the better golfer? Alan Prost, for sure. So I think you're probably saying who was quicker. They won, one championship, the other won the other. What do you want me to say? Prost, shorter corners, Senna more precise and rev the engine more. I was always a guy, the drivers with whom I worked and the world in which I live, I was always a guy that loved the idea of never taking the engine to the maximum in any gear and always being slightly off maximum revs on the straight as well. All the drivers that I've worked with and been friends with all drive like that. And Nigel, very good example. Carlos, another. So Ayrton was the opposite to that. But I loved him for that. And I think I told this story. He and I had a drag race out of the rental car place at Brussels one year en route to Spa, and we were both in Alpha Sud TIs. And I just couldn't work it out. He just went, he just pulled away at every gear. I don't know if it was revs, weight, I have no idea. Even in a straight line, he was unbelievably quick, Ayrton. So there you go. 427005. Interesting number. Interesting name. Is Formula One available in 4K anywhere? Yeah, I think it is. Isn't it? I watch it on my computer and it's crystal clear. Unbelievably clear. There's a thing keeps saying, turn up the volume, Dolby sound or something, which I never do. I always have it mute. But, well, just for the radio I listen to in the engine rooms, but don't do that. Wow. Partycast TV says, great 4K, Peter. Just doing it. Wow, it's working. I can't believe it. 4K. I think Formula One, going back to your question, I think, isn't it in high def well, I don't know high def. 4K, I'm sure it must be. I can't imagine that it's not in 4K. Rob B. It's such a shame a driver like Lando or Leclerc aren't in the other Red Bull. Would love to see Max up against a top driver and just see how good he is. Oh, well, here we go. Everybody's now, saying that Perez isn't any good. It was only about a month ago. Everyone was saying, oh, Perez can take the championship to Max. He's brilliant. Poor old Checo. I was one of the few at that point saying, yeah, get a life, Checo. Ain't going to happen. Now I'm saying, oh, poor Checo. But I don't think it would be that simple. It's not that simple because Max he's so at one with Adrian Newey's brain and what he needs from a car and how to make that happen. That if you put Lando in there, or who's the other one? Charles Leclerc and Lando wouldn't know what buttons to press. And anyway, they'd have to stand in line in order to talk to Adrian anyway. They'd have all their engineers and all that stuff, of course. But ultimately, it's the Adrian Newey brain that Max is tapping into. And I'm convinced, I'll ask Adrian one of, but I'm convinced that somewhere along the line, Adrian would have said to Max, you need to think of a way to get the tyres to work around here. And probably you need to just, use the fronts a bit more going in, just run the corners a bit longer. Maybe Max thought of it on his own. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if Adrian had sort of nudge that along. And I don't think you'd get that sort of relationship if you were a Lando or a Charles plugging into sitting in the Perez car any more than Perez got it. But yeah, I know what you're saying. It's not that I'd love to see Max. I think Max would in any way be under pressure initially from either of those two. I'd love to see Charles in a Red Bull and how he drives it. I'd love to see Lando in a Red Bull, actually, with these long corners. See what he thinks of that. See what he thinks of... I wonder if he would think, why are my corners so long? I don't know. Well, he should have been thinking that already when he's looking at Oscar, but he's probably not. Salome Russell. Good evening, Peter and all. Good evening. Right Hoekstra. Compare Ferrari Le Mans team to the Ferrari Formula One. What a difference. Yeah. What is the difference? Well, they don't have to beat Adrian Newey and Red Bull, I suppose. But no, you're right. I mean, it's a good team that's well-balanced and well-run, and good luck to them. They did a great job. And Ferrari Formula One needs now, I think it's all in the hands of Fred Vasseur, to be honest. He's got this open book, and he can have the engineers he wants. He can get whatever he needs from the drivers, and he can make it happen. So far, no signs of that happening at all. But, as I say, it's still quite a lot of the year to go. Let's wait and see. I don't think he's been managing Charles Leclerc very well, is what I would say. And the reason I think you could say, well, Leclerc should be able to do it on his own. I don't think he should, because he's been at Ferrari in a very political situation for too long. He needs a manager now at Ferrari, a driving manager, who's going to say, look, Charles, don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Don't listen to this. This is what we need to focus on right now. And I don't know what's happening. This is how you need to be driving. And think of this, think of that. Get to the track earlier. Look at the start procedure earlier. Go and watch the support races. Do this, do that. Whatever it is, go and watch Max. I want you to get out of the car after 10 minutes of FP1. I want you to watch Max Verstappen. And don't tell me that you got nothing to learn, because you have. It needs to be that sort of stuff. And I don't think that's happening. I think they're just treating it all as, you know, a normal Formula One situation. We're looking forward to the next race. Things go well. Fans at the track. Everything's wonderful. And they get blown away. Let's not hope that'll happen. I mean, there's a lot of Ferrari fans in Canada, and they'll be very buoyed up by that Le Mans success. I imagine it was watched by quite a lot of Ferrari fans all over the world, and they will be very keyed up at Montreal. And I really hope, because I'm a Charles Leclerc fan, I really hope, and Carlos Sainz fan, I really hope that those guys have a great weekend and things go well, magically. I really do. And it might go all right. The Ferrari could be okay in Canada because there aren't many corners there, are there? And they can, you know, won't be slow in a straight line, I don't think. It probably brakes quite well. But, you know, assuming they had any reliability issues, a guy like Charles on a good set of soft Pirellis should be able to qualify top 3, I would have thought, around Canada. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. Just, you know, just where they are, even without taking into account any upgrades they may have going into this race. Rufus says the Ferrari strategy team needs to be lent to their brothers in Formula One. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, to me, that's not such a big issue. It's a bit like, you know, worrying if you hit a ball a couple of meters offline. If it's a very clean hit and your rhythm is right and everything's good, do you worry about the 1 or 2 meters off? That you don't. You're focusing on the rhythm and the purity of the strike. And it's the same with Ferrari. I think, you know, strategy is always an issue, but it's much more important to have a super quick car with great aero efficiency and 2 drivers who've got very clean, emotional minds and beings who can just get on and be what they want to be without any political dramas. That's the main thing. And then, yeah, you know, the strategy can win or lose your race. But if Ferrari have a great upgrade, the car goes well, they qualify on front row, and they take the race to max, but then they lose it because they got the strategy wrong, okay, it's a bad thing, but it's not the end of the world because at least they're on the right path. Strategy, yeah, you know, it's always important, but it's not critical. Sal De Lucia, Ferrari, they will win again in Formula One. Yeah, let's hope they do. Let's hope they do. I'm sure they will. I can't imagine. Procat says, certainly not 4K on my high-end laptop. Well, that's annoying to hear. Why not? I can't understand that. Maybe when it's in video form on YouTube after the live stream and you go to the viewing options, you can maybe then choose 4K. Maybe that's what it means. But I'm filming it in 4K. I know that for a fact. Glenroy Heath. Who do you have winning the Canadian Grand Prix? Well, Canadian Grand Prix. I just got to say, let's assume there are no issues with all the fallout from all the terrible bushfires I've been having in Canada, and thoughts with all of those who've suffered from that in Canada. And I know there's been tremendous pollution down into North America as well, into the United States. So assuming that that's not an issue and Canada, Montreal happens as it should, and we hope it will. I haven't looked to see what the weather's going to be like. If it's wet, if it's semi-wet and there's sort of the races all over the place, I don't know. I mean, I started this whole thing saying, I thought, hello, this is Dexter coming in to say hello. Hi Dex, how you doing? Little Stroll might go quite well. I mean, could luck into a win, who knows? We just had Nick Taylor win the Canadian Open golf. So, I don't know. I'm not going to say Lance Stroll's going to win the Canadian Grand Prix, but you know, we could have a surprise result there. We could, couldn't we? But let me say this. If I had to put money on, I would bet right now the odds on Charles Leclerc are probably not very good. So maybe he would be quite a good bet if the odds are not very good. for the Canadian Grand Prix. I think Charles will probably have quite a good weekend. I mean, obviously Max and Red Bull are going to be mega quick. The question is, are they going to have an issue of some sort? That's the only thing you're really asking me. And I'm thinking, well, it can't go on forever, can it? He's bound to have some issue at some point. So there we are. Well, I'm not really answering your question. Okay, Charles Leclerc. There you go. Following on Ferrari's great win at Le Mans. Bouncing back. Charles Leclerc to win Canada. Now I've said it. M.A. Khan. Fantasy matchup. Mika versus Russell. In the same car over a lap. And a race at Suzuka or Spa. My money is on the Flying Finn. Yeah, mine's on the Flying Finn. This is Mika circa 2000, right? It's not Mika today. Not that there's much wrong with Mika today. He's probably still very quick. Job done. Drive like crazy. Maximum attack. Yeah, I would have Mika. Yeah, I think Mika. Why not? We love Mika. Wouldn't we do that? See, Mika versus Russell. If you said to Mika, do you reckon you would be quicker than Russell? If Russell was racing with you when you were at your peak, what do you think Mika would say? He'd just shrug his shoulders and walk off, wouldn't he? Diego Marino, hey buddy. Hi there, Peter. Great thing everyone is talking about Le Mans again. What about the amazing NASCAR entered Hendrick Camaro? Yeah, Jensen Button driving it. Yeah, good. Why didn't they have a full field of NASCAR stock cars there, actually? It'd be quite good, wouldn't it? You have 10 NASCAR stockers next year. Next gen, whatever they were. Have all the NASCAR guys over, see what they can do around Le Mans. I mean, in the past, they've all gone quite well. If you think of guys like Hap Sharp and obviously AJ. I mean, AJ Foyt, and he was good on road courses, even before he won Le Mans. I mean, he was incredible in that Scarab at in the Bahama Speedway in 64 from memory. And then he won Le Mans with Dan in 67. But yeah, guys like Roger McCluskey were not slow. IndyCar driver, I know. But you get a few quick NASCAR guys to come over. Wouldn't it be good? Wonderful. Why not? Yeah, I thought it was great. Hendrick, NASCAR, Camaro, Hendrick. Very impressive team, garage, everything. So Rufus says again, how is the forecast for the Canadian Grand Prix as far as the fires? Well, there's already been a statement from the FIA saying there is absolutely no doubt at all the race will go ahead and it's not being subjected to any problems with the fires. Of course, that situation could change, but let's hope it doesn't. Fingers firmly crossed. Alan C. says, Ferrari are a joke. Are a joke for years. GL needs to leave. Who's that? GL needs to leave. You have to tell me who that is. Are we talking about Leclerc now? That's something I don't know about Leclerc's shortening. Robin Visser. They've already spread the orange air in Canada for Max's next victory. Yeah, I bet they have. Jamie Cole. Do you think driving style equals absolute pace, or is there more to it? There are plenty of golfers over the years that have better style than Tiger Woods, but nowhere near as capable. Sam Snead versus Tiger Woods. I only say that because I think Sam is known to have the best swing, maybe Hogan, ever. I think Tiger's always been pretty graceful with his swing myself. I think it's a different thing. I mean, when we talk about style in Formula One, I mean, Christian Horner often talks about form. He's in good form at the moment. I've often wondered what that really means, because I think any racing driver is going to be in good form if he's in a very good racing car, assuming he hasn't got a hangover or something or flu. He's going to be in good form, isn't he? The car kind of dictates the form, really. But it was interesting to hear Christian. It's a bit of a sort of old-fashioned term. It's used in cricket a lot. He's in good form. He hits the ball well, but in motor racing, I'm not sure form works. Style is a similar thing. I think Max has a different style to Sterling Moss, has a different style to Jim Clark, who had a different style to Emmanuel Fangio, but they were all great Grand Prix drivers and all had the same very, very good fundamentals of short corners, of extending the straights, both ends, of innately feeling a rotation point for the car that was not necessarily the geometrical apex and was usually earlier than the geometrical apex. Were very patient mid-corner, never cared about high minimum speed, and focused, once they got the rotation, focused only on getting a perfect diagonal so they could just get the car completely straight and onto the next straight as soon as possible. All those things are the fundamentals, but above all that were differences in style. Absolutely. And every athlete, every human being is different. So I think, if I kind of understand what you're asking, you're kind of saying, well, a short corner is one style, but then Ayrton Senna had another style, which was necessarily quicker. I think if Ayrton was a short corner driver, he would have been even better, to be honest. And I think if he hadn't blipped the throttle, but he was waiting for the moment, I think he would have been better. I think if Alan Prost had driven to the limits of Ayrton Senna, he would have been better. By which I mean within his short corner realm, even to those limits, he always left a little bit of margin, Alan, certainly in the back half of his career. If Nigel Mansell had not had such a tough first 10 years to his Formula One career, going right back to karting, he wouldn't have made as many mistakes as he probably did in the second half of his career. And so it goes on. Everybody's got different, Fangio his career hadn't been interrupted by World War II. He might have raced for another 5 years. Everything's different, driver to driver. But I think the fundamentals remain the same. And the fundamentals ultimately are the fastest way to drive a racing car around a lap. And that's what I talk about on this channel when I talk about short corners. Harble Warble, Flying Hellfish 99. No, hang on, I'm jumping some here. The next one is Carl Gevers. Evening all, evening Peter. Hi Carl. Rob B, would love to see Ocon in a top team car. Think he's very underrated. Yeah, he's good looking to be really good, isn't he? Gasly's very good. And he's actually not only matching everything Gasly can throw at him, but he's actually doing, you could argue, a better job at the moment than Gasly. We'll see what happens as the season progresses, but he's looking really good, Esteban Ocon. And he's starting to emerge, as you say, as a driver that you'd love to see in something like a Mercedes or a Red Bull or a Ferrari. And I think above all, he'll be in good shape to keep his Alpine drive, that's for sure. And they'll be wanting to keep him. But then again, he's not stupid. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I agree with you. He's really good. Short corners, not as short as Max, that's for sure. But he's definitely in that area, in that zone. Shorter than Lando Norris. Sort of George Russell-ish in terms of what he does. Flying Hellfish 99. Hi Peter, is there any chance Williams could land Frederick Vesti for 24? Their second seat is plagued by inept pay drivers. Oh, is that what you think Logan Sargent is? An inept pay driver? He's doing actually a better job, I think, than Nicholas Latifi. He started pretty well, and I think it's all getting a bit on top of him. These street circuits, tracks he hasn't been to, make a mistake, hit the wall. He'll feel a bit more comfortable in Montreal. Not that he's been there before, but it's a bit more open. I think there's another thing. When you're in an environment where everything's quite closed, being able to judge a corner and feel a rotation point is a very different thing to doing that on an open circuit where there's not as much going on in the environment. And it's that ability to be able to do it everywhere. And as Mark Webber said, actually, think of Monaco as just two white lines on the verge and no fences at all. It's that ability that is very difficult for a guy in Logan Sargent's position. If you wanted to choose a circuit that would be perfect to make your Formula One debut, it would be somewhere like Bahrain or Abu Dhabi. Melbourne was pretty tough because there's cambers and things, but it was a good way to come in. But then you got into difficult closed environment circuits, and it's much harder then to feel your moment and do something that's over and above what basically the car allows you to do, because you've got to be more than that if you want to really make an impression. And that's where he's finding it. That's where he's struggling. He'll probably go reasonably well in Canada, would be my prediction. But this is Logan Sargent. But yeah, it's, I think Vesti's good. I'd love to see Vesti in a Williams Mercedes. I really would. I think he's very talented, I say underrated because you don't see him being spoken about a lot. I suppose a lot of people now know his name more because of what he did at Monaco. And in the sprint racing in Spain as well. Really good in the wet. But I don't know. A lot of things got to happen. He is a Mercedes driver. Whether that runs to Mercedes saying to Williams, yeah, free engines, run Frederic Vesti, I very much doubt it. But then Frederic, as I said, I think I was on a tweet I did, he's very switched on when it comes to having good people around him. And he's got a very good management team. They think about how to manage sponsors. And bear in mind, he's got that company Heisel, I think it is, on the car, which I think is a big department store in his country. And very sadly, the owner of that, not an old, I think in his late 40s, Max, passed away, I think about a year ago now. And it's to A, the credit of Vesti and his team, and B, the credit of Heisel that they're continuing to back him and believe in him. And I think that's a great thing. And as I said, they had the Crown Prince in Barcelona. That's working hard. That's a driver doing a really good job in the background, trying to get stuff happening so that he can take the next step and not just hope that the phone will ring. And he does a good job. That's why I've got a lot of time for Frederic Vesti. I think he's really talented, A, and B, I think and you see that in the wet. You see it in the wet. Very short corners, very, very good at feeling the grip, very, very supple in everything he does. Really good. And I think I'll tell you what, Oliver Behrman's not bad, is he? Very good. Congratulations to him as well. I mean, the two Prema drivers are really good. It's such an irony that, because then you got Théo Pourchaire at ART still, and of course it was Pourchaire that Vesti beat in Formula 3 or GP3 that put him on the map, that great race at Monza. And then Vesti went to ART and struggled, not the only driver to struggle at ART. And now he's gone back to Prema, and it's kind of Vesti against Pourchaire again. I think it's ironic. Is that the right word? Weird, anyway. So I hope he does. I hope Pourchaire makes it too. I'd love to see Pourchaire. I'd love to see him in an Alpine, I guess. No, he's a Sauber driver. Yeah, Sauber. In the Audi days, wouldn't that be cool? Pourchaire in an Audi F1 car. Mega. Harble Warble says, hi Peter, do you follow WEC? Was it a good weekend for Ferrari at Le Mans? Yeah. Well, it was a good, I was kind of following it on and off in between the World Test Cricket Championship, which Australia won. Mega. Congratulations to Pat Cummins and his team, and to Cameron Green, who is definitely a superstar. And great win for them at the Oval. And then the Canadian Open as well. There's a lot going on. And then Le Mans, in and out of it all. Cars spinning all over the place in the early days at Le Mans, early races, early laps. So I think I will start following WEC. I'm a bit of a fan of Tatiana Calderon, who I think she's a very good driver, much better than she looks. She's been allowed to look, let's put it that way. And I really respect her continual head down, keep racing, I'm going to do the best I can. And she races, I think it's a shame that she's in ELMS and she wasn't at Le Mans because, I think you have to win that championship to get an entry or something. It's so difficult. It's a shame. I'd like to have seen her at Le Mans in something good. That's one of the thoughts I had at the weekend. I think she could have, in a decent car, I think she would have had a good weekend. So there you go. Lots of good drivers who should be in Formula One. James Collado, good example. Who are now doing, and be very happy that they're in WEC doing well. Jack Aitken, don't think they had a great weekend, but good to see him there with Cadillac. Yeah, he's good. Very good. Deserves a real opportunity. Alpha 007 org. Hello. I have to listen double speed because I'm late. Okay. Okay, and it's nearly 10 o'clock anyway. Is that, yeah, 11 o'clock here where I am actually. So it's 2 hours, it's almost up. The witching hour. DCO 101, can drivers adapt to styles similar to Max, Leclerc, Lewis, etc., or is it pretty much set in stone how a driver drives? No, it's not set in stone, and they can adapt, but you've got to work. You've got to really work at all the things that they never work at. They're constantly at the simulator just doing all the stuff the engineers think and driving the lap that they drive. And anyway, the simulator's hand-eye, it's not feeling the surface of the road. They're doing that. Then they're at the gym, then they're going bike riding or whatever they're doing, and they just never make time actually to think about their own driving and how they're going to improve it. Never, in my experience, unless they... I'm not going to say Rob Wilson's the only guy, but he certainly is out there to be phoned and to be spoken, to have conversations with, even if you don't do a day with him. I mean, if Charles Leclerc rang Rob and said, Rob, any thoughts on my driving? I'm sure Rob would say, look, you know, this is what I think you need to do. You don't have to do it, Charles, but this is... And the odd thing is, I've done a lot of days with Rob when I've sat in the back seat when he's had Grand Prix drivers or F2 drivers, F3 drivers, all very good drivers. And on every single occasion, every driver has come away having learnt something. And when there's an engineer present, the engineer has, without fail, come away saying, wow, yeah, we never thought of that. And it's not the sort of thing we look at on the telemetry at all. They always say the same thing. And so given all of that, it's astounding to me that a lot of drivers who don't have the Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton short corner ability don't look for ways of trying to close that gap. I think Oscar Piastri is trying to do that. And we know Sergio Perez is starting to realise that he's doing something that's different from Max. But that's probably about it. I don't think Carlos Sainz is thinking, I need to really... he's probably thinking, I'm getting better and better and I'm going to have Charles soon. He's not thinking, what does Charles do really well that I can learn from? I bet he's not thinking that, because that's not the way racing drivers are brought up to think. The teammates are guy to beat. So it's not etched in stone, and you often see drivers improving dramatically throughout their career. François Sever, a very good example of a driver who was much better by 1973 than he was in 1971. Completely different driver. I think Denny Hulme became a much more refined front-end driver towards the back end of his career. You may think, oh, well, there years ago. What does that mean? That doesn't happen at all. Well, let's wait and see what happens with, for example, Oscar Piastri. You know, he could become very, very good if he goes down that path. In my mind, and I may be wrong here, but in my mind, the things that you need to learn in order to drive like Max, if you already have the talent of somebody like, say, Carlos Sainz, that extra bit is all about muscle memory, and it's all about repetition in the same way that a bunker shot is about repetition and muscle memory. 1,000 bunker shots will eventually produce the great one. And if you don't have an environment where you can do that repetition, literally in a road car or some sort of car that makes sense, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen just through mindset and thinking you're going to do that. You've got to feel it. You've got to have it in your muscles. You've got to have it in your bones. And you've got to have that ability to feel the surface of the road and eye up the rotation point in the way Max does. And if you're not doing that, it's not going to happen just by thinking about it. And again, I don't believe many engineers say that to their drivers. And I don't think, and the evidence is Freddie Vasseur is not saying that to his drivers either. Navin Naidu says, Peter, you like coffee or tea? Coffee. Yeah, I'm not a tea. Iced tea I can get into. Peach or lemon iced tea, definitely, but coffee is my thing. And I have to say, it's the one thing, if I had to untick a box or not tick a box in Spain, it would be the coffee, because my wife is Colombian, and the Colombian coffee, as you know, is brilliant, and particularly from Medellin, particularly this brand, Pergamino, from Medellin. But interestingly, you may think, oh, the Colombians drink very strong black coffee. They don't. They actually drink coffee beautifully mixed with milk. The right sort of milk as well, not too fatty, just the right amount of milk, and that's how they drink their coffee. And they drink it in quite large, cups and mugs. And here in Spain, if you ask for a latte, they just look at you as if you're mad. cappuccino might come, but it's usually tepid and it's not very good. Obviously, if you just want a plain black coffee, quite short and bitter, Spain's your country. But there are a couple of Starbucks, but I'm finding even a standard Starbucks latte doesn't feel the same here. It doesn't taste the same as it does in Alabama or London. Because Starbucks have that sort of thing, everything's the same, but it's not the same here. It's bizarre. So I'm kind of almost giving up on coffee in Spain, apart from what we do here. And I've just spent a bit of money on having a proper coffee machine and importing the coffee. And Pergamino is what we love. And the only problem is the milk, actually. I think the problem, is there aren't many cows here because it's too hot. And the milk's not great. Most of it's all very heavily processed milk. I think that could well be the problem. In which case I'll start thinking about not drinking milky coffee. Anyway, that's all that. I'm not into tea anyway. I never really got into tea. Pantrophy. Verstappen is 10 out of 10. Rest is 8 out of 10 or lower. Well, he's 10 out of 10 in this car. And he's done a great job in this car with Adrian. But, don't discount the others that much. I would put, at the moment I'd say Lewis is 9 and Charles about 8.5. Mario Dalla Riva. Grazie mille, Peter. Thank you very much, Mario. Grazie mille. Steve Mandiza. Hey, Peter, do you think Formula One should adopt the engine regs of WEC? I think they do, don't they? They're all hybrid or something. Haven't they got a much lower price thing there? I mean, budget cap in Formula One is 300 million or something, and there it's a lot less. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I think you're talking to a guy that thought we had pretty good engines in the V10, V8 era. They cost 12 million for a year, and they were unbelievably reliable. Everybody finished the race, and they were easy, consistent, comparable. And then we went to something that was 24 million a year, much more complicated, more unreliable, but much better in terms of the future and energy usage. And we're going to get all these manufacturers into Formula One. So I don't know. I think Formula One, if Bernie was running Formula One now, he'd be very annoyed that Le Mans was as successful as it was, because he would think that all these teams and manufacturers should be in Formula One spending money, not in Le Mans. But we're in a different era now with Liberty, and they seem to be a lot more Catholic in their approach, and they seem to think, well, if it's Le Mans is getting fans and the manufacturers, that's got to be good for Formula One. It's not the way Bernie used to think, so we're interested to see how it goes. Robin Samuels. Pantrol F1. The Formula One driver ratings for Spain were criminal. Same for Monaco. I should actually say, as usual. What ratings? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. What Formula One driver ratings? Who rated them? I don't know. I didn't rate any drivers. Or am I missing something here? I don't follow the driver ratings, says somebody else. No. Well, I don't either. Well, what driver ratings? Hi, Peter. How are you? This is Pine XT. What did you think of the race, Spain? I feel despite that Red Bull is out of reach, I think we'll have a solid race for P2 in the constructors. Well, I actually enjoyed the race at the front. I enjoyed the race for P1 and the way Max managed that race and what he was doing with various tyres and the length of the tyre and the lap times. I love watching that. I thought it was a fascinating race at the front. Yeah, there was quite a lot of good stuff going on. But to me, I really enjoyed Spain. It was a very sort of scientific race, and I love those. Driven by a really, really good racing driver. I love that as well. So, yeah. And obviously, if you want competitive racing, look, everything below. What's going on with Max and to some extent Perez. Aston Martin didn't have a very good day. And Mercedes had a very good day. Ferrari had a mediocre to poor day. And that could all change around in Canada. Alpine were kind of there again, top 10. So, there's quite a lot going on, isn't there? And McLaren faded without trace. And even, despite the issues they had, Lando ramming Lewis, he wasn't very quick, even with the new front wing, was he? And that was because it was dry. And, of course, the long corners are quite slow. Well, sorry, that's not the case. What it meant was suddenly the thing he was doing, which others weren't, was getting the tyres to work. Only about 5 people did, really. wasn't the case on race day. There was nothing he could do there that was different. And all of a sudden the McLaren became just a slow Formula One car. Aaron Mendoza. When it comes to just raw talent, Checo is up there with the best, including Max. But consistency is his main problem. I disagree with that. I don't think he has the same raw talent as Max, but I actually think he's quite a consistent racing driver and very, very difficult to overtake in a race. I think he's brilliant in defense and very consistent in a race. But I don't think he has the raw talent of Max Verstappen, by which I mean I don't think he has the same feel for short corners, rotation points, patience mid-corner, linear exits that allow him to just have the car completely flat and ready to go. What he's really good at, as I've said a million times, is under power, he's very good at loading up the rear at exactly the right rate, as we saw rewarded in Sector 1 in Baku. That is his forte, under power. But all the stuff Max does is not under power. It's under brakes and steering. He creates a situation where he just gets the power on and goes. He doesn't have to worry about the load transition, except Sector 1 Baku. So I would actually, with respect, I'd actually disagree with both of those points. Will I Am, good day, Peter. Mark Kelly, good day, mate. Ferrari Formula One team must be ashamed of themselves after what happened at Le Mans. I don't know. Are they? I don't think they're thinking, Ferrari can win Le Mans, we can't. I mean, they're thinking, well, we've got to beat Red Bull and Mercedes. They've got to beat Toyota and Cadillac. I mean, not quite the same, is it? Gabor Bekeski, Ron. It's just Ron, and very nice. He's donating something. Thank you so much. How sweet of you. Very kind. Thank you. So I don't think they're ashamed of themselves. I think Leclerc probably goes away thinking, that was boring. Can't do something else. I'm putting words in his mouth. It's probably not what he thought. Pantro F1. Aaron Checo doesn't have as much raw talent as Max. Good. Yeah, well, you said it as well. Cliff, all the pressure is on Lance this weekend. Too bad his nickname can't be Lance Pole instead of Lance Troll. Yeah, well, I expect something from him. I mean, he must be buoyed up a bit after Spain, and he must be thinking, Canada's not that difficult. It's probably what I think he believes, quite rightly so, that he's shown enough on occasions in various races over the years that he's actually not bad. And given the right set of circumstances in the right order, in a car as good as an Aston Martin, he might be looking at a podium. I'm sure that's what he's thinking. I'm not sure he feels the pressure very much because, as I said at the beginning, that whole business, he's not a Gilles Villeneuve fan. I mean, he obviously doesn't. I wouldn't have thought he's that moved or emotional about anything if that's the case. And so therefore, whether he's racing in Canada or Saudi Arabia probably doesn't mean a lot to him. But I would imagine he's thinking, interesting circuit. We might go quite well there. Problem is going to be top speed, but take off a bit of wing. We might be halfway there. Who knows? That's probably what they're thinking. So there's been a lot of discussion here. People saying Perez isn't even close to being as good as Max, raw talent. And Diego Marino says, what do you think about the Cataluna track being back to its pre-07 layout without the last chicane? Well, I loved it, Diego. I thought it was great, and full marks to the organisers. If it was they that did that, it might have been the FIA. I don't know. Probably not the FIA, because they would have known straight away that it was not going to be great for overtaking. So full marks, yeah. Great to see that corner again. Great to see how many people, ran out of road, including Fernando Alonso. And, it's a good corner, isn't it? It's a great corner. It brought the worst out in a lot of people, and the best. So we need more corners like that. Alex Kalpexidis says, Checo's a good driver. The problem is, very good driver. Problem is Max is from a different breed. Well, yeah, well said. W. Cooley, the rookie drivers, which do you think has the lowest % chance of success? I don't know. Logan Sargent, being an American on the cusp of Formula One's America explosion, you'd imagine has got a reasonable chance of keeping his drive for a year or two more, I would have thought, and having a chance to prove that he's better than some people think. I think he's quite good, Logan, actually. I've always been a bit of a fan since the Formula Renault days, and I think he's technique is not bad now. He very long corners when he started doing his third driver stuff, but he's now starting to look a bit tighter. As I say, the problem's been all these circuits recently. Very difficult baptism for a rookie in his situation. But I think he should go quite well in Canada. Austria will probably be all right. Where else? Ricard maybe should be all right. Anywhere open. I think he'd probably be a bit overwhelmed by Silverstone. Maybe not. Maybe could run Silverstone. I don't know. Who else is there then? Nick De Vries. He's doing all right. I'm not sure what his future is, to be honest. I think he's doing all right against Yuki, quite short corner driver. I'm not sure he's the sort of anchor pin that team needs if you got Yuki in the other car. More like Daniel Ricciardo job, isn't it? But Nick, I think he's a pretty talented driver, actually. It sounds very condescending of me to say that, but I think he's definitely good. I'm glad he's got his Formula One chance, but I can't see him having a massive future in Formula One, I suppose, if you really want me to try and answer that question. It's quite a difficult question to answer. So anyway, there's quite a lot of stick here about people complaining that somebody thought Perez was as good as King the Conqueror is asking. Hello, King. Kang the Conqueror, sorry. Are Mercedes missing Aldo Costa? That's a good question, because there was a experienced head on experienced shoulders, now back at Dallara, ex-Ferrari, did a good job at Mercedes, quietly spoken, possibly not pushy enough at Mercedes, I would think, if I had to guess. Yeah, I think the answer is yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rob Marshall, Red Bull, has gone to McLaren, hasn't he? Rob Marshall's a good guy, and you have to think, why didn't Mercedes hire Rob Marshall? That was my first thought when I heard that he'd gone to McLaren. He was the first guy Adrian hired when he went to Red Bull, and from McLaren. And so he's a pretty good, again, good head on good shoulders. And I think McLaren have made a very, very good move there. Good move too, I think, by Sauber / Alfa Romeo / Audi to hire James Key. As I said at the time, I think James Key is a bit of a scapegoat there, and I think he's very good. So, and I think Aldo Costa's very good. And he's definitely an engineer that if you were, actually, to be honest with you, if you were Frederick Vasseur, you'd be thinking of going back to Aldo Costa, I would have thought. And Mr. Ninja Fish says, budget cap stuff should be handled by the people who have to make the technical bits. I'd prefer if they limited the amount of mechanics working on the cars at every race. Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I've made that point too about the pit stops. I think we should go back to 8-second pit stops and have far fewer mechanics, a little bit like Formula 2 pit stops, and then you're going to have more variation because there's more room for error, obviously. So again, Formula One probably will never do that because they think that 2-second pit stop is their DNA, part of their DNA. I know what's happened here. I've lost that. I know. I've done something very stupid. I'm going to go back to my platform here. I couldn't work out why that banner. I know what's happened here. I didn't have it in loop mode. Sorry. There it is. I'm just going back to got the banner on now. It's a bit late. I know, very late in the day. So what I'm going to do then is thank Jetcraft and Pitbox.io very much for their support of this channel, and apologize for not having the banner for most of this live stream because I was in a bit of a panic and I forgot to put it in loop mode, and once it did its one thing, it disappeared. So there it is, it's back again, which isn't very good. But big thanks to both of those. And you can find descriptions about both of those great companies in below the video in YouTube. But yeah. Pitbox, a mega software actually. If you are doing any sort of track days, club racing days, national racing, great way of getting all your information under one roof, as it were. And Jetcraft, you know, in the executive business jet world, the hub is Jetcraft. Wheels Up, NetJet, they all focus on Jetcraft. So now let's have Camino cloning operations. How much of Le Mans did you watch? Happy with the outcome? Happy with the outcome? Yeah, I think so. Good to see Ferrari winning again. Didn't watch that much. I was, doing lots of stuff like everybody else all weekend. Mainly, lots of things, lots of different sports activities, watching the golf, watching the cricket. The Desert Kiwi. Peter, do you think Zak Brown has done a good job at McLaren? I'm lost for words. I'm surprised he kicked Honda into touch, because I always thought Honda were a great engine company and great partner to have, and so it proved. I'm surprised he got rid of Daniel Ricciardo. And I'm surprised he got rid of James Key. Apart from that, and I think he's done a brilliant job with Lando Norris. I think without Zach, Lando probably wouldn't be where he is. And I think he's done a pretty good job probably of getting the finances sorted at McLaren with the Bahrainis and new companies coming in, sponsors. I think Alex Palou is very good. I'm not sure that Zach should take any credit for that. I know he's under contract to Zach, but I think Adrian Campos should take the real credit for Alex Palou. He gave Alex the real chance in his early days. But Alex is good, and I'd love to see him in a Formula One car at some point. What else can I say about Zach? I think I'm not sure. You could say, well, United Autosports and all these drivers that he manages, he can't focus, but that's the way he is. He's always all over the place. And if he focused, I don't think it'd be any different. I think McLaren would be just the same team. So we'll see. I think he's done a good job with Rob Marshall. Well, I don't know how much of that was Zach, but I think that was a good move. As I say, I'm not convinced that James Key, getting rid of James Key was a great thing, but we'll see. I think the biggest mistake was to kick Honda into touch, to be honest, and then spend whatever he spent, 23, 24 million on Mercedes engines. And they were free. The Honda engines were free. All they had to do was work with Honda in a way that was logical, as Red Bull did. So, I don't know. I can't, that doesn't add up to a rating of, I suppose. He's a friend, apart from anything else, so I don't really want to go any further than that, other than to say what I've said. But he's a friend, and, I like him as a person. What's that? Oh, thanks. Thank you. What's all this? Oh, I think I know what those are. Yeah. Good. Mitch Buchanan. Hi, Peter. Do you mind wearing your hat backwards? The whole point is the Jetcraft thing. So, no. Why would I? Well, actually, without the banner, that's what would be even worse if I'd done that, wouldn't it? At least I've got the banner up now. Look, it's working. How stupid was that not to tick the loop? There's always something. That's because I was in such a rush buying Dexter's food, dog food, kibble. Stefan RHYS. Hey, Peter, enjoying the chat. Who do you think has been the better second driver between Perez currently and the job Bottas did at Mercedes? If it was one or the other, I'd go for Bottas. I like Valtteri's style and approach to racing, and I think with the right management, you can get more out of Bottas actually than maybe Alfa are at the moment. They're kind of taking him for granted. He's the senior driver, gets in, let him do his thing. I think he needs to be pushed a bit. But I think he's good, Bottas. I think he's great number two. Keeps his mouth shut, quiet. Perez is a bit emotional, isn't he, when things don't go his way. So if I was choosing a number two for my Lewis or my Max or my Charles, I would probably go for Valtteri. Right now. Not right now, I'll probably go for Valtteri. I might go for Carlos Sainz. Darwin Lee. No, yeah. Zach has done great for McLaren commercially and financially. which is what matters to shareholders. I think they also quite like to see the team win. I'm not sure they were very happy about McLaren's performance in Bahrain, where the shareholders seem to be based, and how badly McLaren went in that opening race. I think that was a massive furore. So I'm not sure that's the case. I think they need to deliver on the racetrack. And he says he's done great for McLaren financially. I just like an expansion on that under the heading of he kicked Honda into touch and spent 24 million going to Mercedes with not much change in fortune. A big question here. Bobtic. I'm not going to be able to answer it now. What are the big differences between Max and Hamilton driving style? At the moment, there's quite a big difference because Lewis is all the time going in slightly wider, longer corners. That's how he seems to be getting the feel for the car, maybe the tyres, whatever it is. He's just extending the straight under braking a bit more than Max, but he's not coming to such an early rotational point. That's the biggest difference. Very similar in terms of suppleness and inputs. The rate of input is always perfect with both of them. The way they brake at high speed is identical, I think. I think it's only just that the fact that Lewis has modified his driving a little bit recently in the way Max did in qualifying in Spain. Other than very similar. Partycast TV. That's what I need. Some sort of broadcast TV thing that gets me. I'm trying to find how to get onto move. If anybody knows the answer to this, I'm trying to find how to get the golf on TV here in Spain. I know it's on Movistar Plus or something. But whenever I try to talk to Movistar Plus, they're always trying to get me to go on the internet or buy a cell phone from them or do something. All I want is to be able to watch the golf on my phone and on my computer. Don't want anything else. And I'm happy to pay Movistar, whatever they want to be paid for that. I don't want any of the other extras. Seems impossible now. And that's the problem with pay TV. It's all so complicated now. It's got all these bolt-ons. And, I can tell you, if you're trying to watch professional golf on TV in Spain, you've got to have a cell phone deal with them. It's ridiculous. Lucky Reed, if Formula One go with new 100% biofuel, why can't they bring V8 engines back? Yeah, well, there's a good and politically incorrect question, isn't it? Yeah, good point. Very good point. Very good point. Not allowed to mention the V8 or V10 words these days, I don't think. Anyway, I'm going to have to stop now. It's 11:30. I've got to take Jack to school tomorrow, crack of dawn. So anyway, I'm just picking one at the end. Zabar Aslam says, hi Peter, are there any particular motor racing movies over the years that you really enjoy? Grand Prix, John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix. Still love it. Got it on my download list there. I watch it periodically. Love that. Anything else? Not really. No, I think it was it, really, Grand Prix. I think all the other ones we always thought, it's a shame they did that or didn't get this right. So yeah, just Grand Prix. Standard work. Hi Peter, can we have any personal recollections or memories from Canada 2011, that heroic Button comeback? Yeah, Jensen taking Lewis out on the pit straight. No. I mean, it was just one of those Jensen days, like that race he won in his first win in Hungary. And very, when Jensen's in that situation, he was dead last, wasn't he? And but he was so good at feeling the grip. That was what Jensen was so good at. Not with the front of the car, with the rear of the car. And just McLaren was perfect for that at that time. And he just was really good all day. But I think Lewis would have won that race if he hadn't been taken out. That's my take. But I suppose that's not what matters anymore, is it? So there we go. There we are. Jetcraft, Pitbox.io, and thank you too for watching, for joining me, having so much fun. I think we had a lot of fun today. And I'll be doing, as I say, we're going to, obviously this weekend, Canada, I'm going to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday videos as normal. Bear in mind, quite a big time difference. Might keep the videos a bit shorter. But after that, I'm going to get into doing some videos about short corners, comparing drivers within every team. So hope you enjoy those, and looking forward to making those as well. But above all, thank you very much for watching. Have a safe rest of the day, a good week, and in terms of video, see you on Friday after FP1 and FP2 from Montreal. Thanks for watching. Now I'm going to go to my other thing. I always have that close, and then I have to go back to my other platform here to do the ending. So here it is. Thank you.